In the world of intricate patterns, he thinks about the woman before him, Alexandra de Chevalier. He feels that even in his real life she is the heroine he loves the most. While this thought flashed through his mind, she stands before him with a slight, knowing smile. This world is the setting of the mobile game Engage Hazard, or simply Haza. It is a chat-based romantic RPG filled with adventures, humor, and many unique heroines to meet. In this game there is only one condition. For the hero to sit on the throne and become the next king, he needs the best bride in the world. One of the predecessors is none other than Harold Welly Decavals, the third prince of the kingdom of Decavals, one of the most powerful among the Western kingdoms. But this story is not his. Another boy in simple pajamas covers his face with despair. Just realized this morning that he became that very Prince Harold, a character known as a vile, despicable, and talentless villain, and that person is now Am. He suddenly sat up in bed, stunned by this revelation. When he opened his eyes, memories of his past life flooded his mind just like in those stories about reincarnation he once read. He recalls his past life when he was called Takebana Haru, studied at college, but couldn't get along with people and couldn't fit in among his classmates. Through this isolation, he sought solace in the two-dimensional world of games. It was then that he first met Kaza. Lying on his back in bed, he struggles with his new reality, admitting to himself that he was addicted to the game and spent a lot of money on it. But that's not the main issue. The real problem is that he was reborn as Harold of all the characters. He clearly remembered Harold's fate. Envy of the game's main character drove him to rebellion. It failed, and he was executed. A grim realization came over him. About 3 years remained until the main story began, but when his eyes narrowed with determination, he swore. He would not allow this. He knew literally everything about the world of Inhaz. It was this knowledge that gave him an advantage, and with it, he had a chance to do something to change his fate. His face hardened with determination, would not allow himself to die, and would survive at any cost. His determination was no longer limited to saving himself. The image of Alexandra de Chevalier, shackled and standing before the guillotine, flashed before his eyes, and he vowed to save her too. Later, dressed in the prince's ceremonial attire, he anxiously looked at his reflection and doubted whether he had truly chosen the best path. A voice called him nearby. The call came from 2 maids who were happily clapping their hands. They could not contain their admiration, saying that the outfit suited him and that his highness looked more splendid than ever. But he was terribly dissatisfied. He thought he looked ridiculous and awkward. He felt uneasy because in his previous life he only wore black. He sharply ordered something black that fit better to be brought and declared this outfit unacceptable. After changing into the black uniform that he preferred, he enthusiastically admired his reflection, thinking he looked very good. But this pleasure suddenly ended when he saw the time on the nearby clock, and at that moment, frightened, he pressed himself against the mirror, and a servant ran up and handed him something. Before him, a finely patterned handkerchief was extended for him to taste. Soon the item was indeed needed. Seeing a crying girl nearby, he approached her and handed her the handkerchief, asked if everything was all right, and requested her to stop crying. Her tears ceased. She raised her eyes to him with a gentle smile, clutching the handkerchief. He walked away regretting that he had not asked her name. Just then a voice called Prince Harold. He muttered a curse under his breath, told them to continue, and hurriedly rushed to catch up. He appears before his father, the king, and immediately apologizes for being late. But his attention is immediately caught by a young woman standing before him, his Princess Alexandra. He solemnly introduces himself and says it is a great honor to meet her. Memories from his previous life rush through his mind. He instantly recognizes her. Alexandra de Chevalier, daughter of the Duke and representative of the most influential noble family of the Kingdom of de Havel. She was one of the heroines in the game, Activate Hazard. He remembers the reputation that circulated in the game's plot. She was called the Frozen Villainess due to her harsh treatment of other heroines. Although she was one of the first heroines in the game, her characteristics were considered the worst. This unpopularity turned into terrible consequences. He remembers her tragic fate. If the player did not choose a romance with Alexandra, she and her father would be executed for conspiracy and preparing a rebellion. Popularity polls of characters from his old world confirmed. Among users, she was in last place. And even despite everything, he confidently remembered that she was still his favorite. In the game, there was a specific path where one could see her true thoughts about the main character, and he wonders if she will finally look at him now. He clearly remembers the moment when she conquered him. One phrase, said sincerely, from the bottom of her heartand that was enough to steal his heart. This memory ignites his determination. He clenches his fist and vows never to be a clumsy, wicked prince again. He will survive in this world for himself and for her. His prolonged silence destroys the solemn atmosphere of the court. The king jokes that Harold is probably stunned by Alexander's beauty. Returning to reality, Harold stammers and apologizes, while Alexander looks at him with a puzzled expression. Grasping the chance, the king invites them to have tea together in the courtyard. Sitting opposite her, Harold feels the weight of his task. He knows he must build a relationship with her right now, or the worst possible future will come true. But an awkward silence hangs between them. They do not speak at all. He clenched his fist, and a tremor ran down his arm. This was exactly the situation he had been trying to avoid. Noticing his anxiety, Alexandra broke the silence and asked what was wrong. Gathering his thoughts, he lowered his eyes and began to speak, sincerely confessing that he knew about her low opinion of him and admitting that he had not yet been a good prince, so she could still refuse their engagement. Her expression became sharp. She demanded to know exactly what he was trying to say. His gaze met hers, determination in it strengthened, and he answered, 3 years. She froze at his confession. He leaned forward, his voice sounding convincing, begging to give him just 3 years. He swore that in that time he would prove himself and become a man worthy of her. He fell to his knees before her and promised. If even after those 3 years he still turned out to be a disappointment, he would personally go to the king and ask to break off their engagement. His voice trembled as he begged her again from the floor. Please, give me 3 years. From her place, Alexandra looked down at his bent figure, her thoughts hidden behind a neutral expression. He raised his gaze, his face tense. After a moment, she replied that she understood. Then she firmly stated that she alone would decide whether his feelings were genuine. Having made her decision, she gave a quiet signal. A maid named Monica appeared and nodded that the order was heard. Alexandra turned to Harold and briefly explained the conditions. She would strike him with full force, and he was only to block, and this sudden proposal completely confused him. His thoughts raced. The proposal seemed to him utterly absurd, but her gaze did not waver, and she directly challenged him, asking if his hesitation meant that he agreed to have his earlier resolve dismissed as a mere farce. Her words hit the mark. Soon he was already standing with sword and shield, his face set with stern determination. Opposite him, Alexandra's stern expression melted into a gentle smile, and she thanked him for agreeing. He pulled himself together to silence the turmoil in his head. Everything would be fine. She told him simply to block the strike. He knew he might not be able to deliver a counterattack, but he was confident he could withstand one blow. With renewed determination, he confirmed his will. Opposite him, Alexandra raised her blade, her face stern. She was preparing to begin the trial. The attack struck instantly, like lightning, much faster than he could imagine. The shield shattered into pieces under the stunning force, the blow threw him back and knocked him to his knees, and the sword clattered dully as it slid across the ground. Before he could recover, Alexandra was already standing over him, her foot pressing on his shoulder. He looked up in confusion, his eyes wide. Her eyes glowed red. He had never seen anything like it before, but though bewildered, he had to admit. He had truly just witnessed Her Highness's resolve. When she smiled, a light blush flared on her cheeks. She officially introduced herself as Alexandra de Chevalier and said she eagerly awaited to see what Prince Harold would achieve in the next 3 years. Stunned and embarrassed, he only stammered and whispered, "Thank you." After the trial ended and their agreement was made, Harold waved goodbye as Alexandra's carriage set off, and she watched from the window with a gentle smile. He watched the carriage disappear into the distance, and a confident smile blossomed on his face. This was the first step, and he vowed to himself that in 3 years he would definitely reach his goal. Meanwhile, in the carriage, Alexandra barely contained her excitement. She had done it. Finally, mentally celebrating, she recalled that since that fateful day she had harbored feelings for Prince Harold, and now she truly. Her maid Monica gently interrupted the celebration. Addressing her as Odusoma, she advised Alexandra not to forget to be cautious. Although she understood her joy after the successful engagement with Prince Harold, the joyful sparkle in Alexandra's eyes showed that the secret request for the engagement was worth it. Alexandra pouted her lips and asked for at least a little leniency. Monica remained stern. She acknowledged that her mistress's feelings were genuine, but insisted that Alexandra understand her point of view. The maid then pointed to a simple, indisputable fact. Alexandra's face was incredibly flushed. This remark completely caught the princess off guard. She shuddered when Monica noted that her eyes had briefly reddened during the previous match. The maid warned insistently. If Prince Harold sees the truth in her eyes, the engagement she had worked so hard for might fall apart. Monica advised being more careful and reproachfully asked why she couldn't be at least a little friendly or at least smile at the prince. Embarrassed, Alexandra shouted back that it was simply impossible for her. The harsh assessment continued. Monica said that Alexandra often avoids communication and concluded that her social skills are clearly below average for a girl her age. and these words hit Alexandra like a physical blow. She quietly agreed, admitting that she knew about her unfriendliness. She had heard people whisper behind her back, calling her cold as ice or comparing her to a fairy tale villainess. Changing the subject, Monica confessed that she never imagined Prince Harold could fend off even one of her attacks. Alexandra agreed, confirming that the blow was even strengthened by her dragon's affection. She vividly remembered that moment. He not only overcame her at the moment of the strike, he subtly adjusted his blade to her movement and thus dissipated the force, and she felt that he might not even realize what he had done. Her thoughts dove into a deeper memory. Holding the machine close to her chest, she confidently whispered to herself that no one else suited her better as a partner. The memory of the day he saved her from that place surfaced for her. It could only be Prince Garome. Meanwhile, in his chambers, Prince Harold sat and pondered his future. He knew that in this world Haza was a combat mode, but he understood well that if he started fighting now, he would definitely die. He grimaced, recalling how he demanded a 3-year engagement with Alexandra, and admitted to himself that it was just an attempt to look cool. In reality, his stats were completely unbalanced. Magical attack and defense were quite high, but there was a serious flaw. All of Harold's skills were light, but he himself was of dark element, and this dissonance weakened him. Moreover, his physical strength was extremely pathetic, so his only hope was a huge reserve of 999 skill points, and these points were needed to activate any of his abilities. He was thinking about his predicament. His princely form, Harold, had considerable potential. The real question was how his other personality, Takebana Haru, would train the body. And Haru himself had a completely different, much simpler thought. He urgently needed to find a weapon. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. A maid with a stern expression entered and informed him that from now on she would take care of him, introducing herself as Marion Zyler. A young woman in a maid's uniform solemnly introduced herself. She was Marion Zyler, and from today she was entrusted with taking care of Prince Harold. The prince's eyes widened in shock. He instantly recognized the name and could not understand why the heroine was here if she was supposed to be Wilfred's maid. She adds that he can boldly trust her with everything he needs. Harold, still recovering from this surprise, can only quietly and uncertainly agree. He turns back and walks away. Marion quietly whispers to her. Phone thought betrays her professional composure. What a failure. 4 clicks and Harold Silute was left alone in the room. Alone, a twisted smile appears on his face, reflects on his nature. An arrogant man who bows to the strong, a clumsy, villainous prince, and for someone like him, he thinks, being the object of such contempt is actually more convenient. Thoughts fly to his true goal to avoid the attention of other heroines and live a quiet, peaceful life with his fiancée, Alexandra. But cold reality puts this at risk. According to the initial course of events, Marion was supposed to become Wilfred's servant only after 3 years. Deviation from the usual path strikes Harold with sharp pain. He clutches his chest, his face twisted in agony, and implores that the suffering not be too severe. This is a fleeting glimpse into his past, a story not found in the tale he knows as in Hasa. All his torment began in childhood. From an early age, he was called incapable and constantly compared to exemplary brothers. He could not use the coat of arms of the Huts, a symbol of the royal family, or master any other skill. Despite this, he craved his parents' approval, trained and studied tirelessly, but in response saw only indifference. Memory, however, is sharper and more painful than arrest. The words of his dear mother echo in his head said that if he cannot even replace the first Prince Cardis, then at least he must try not to hinder him, and even now this memory seems to tear his heart apart. When he finally lies down in bed, still under the weight of his mother's words, he quietly asks Marion for a basin to wash his face, and she stands completely still and silent, no response. A week passes, and he cannot stop thinking about how Marion has completely neglected her duties during this time, even for the so-called clumsy evil prince. Her behavior seems too contemptuous to him. To achieve his goals, he heads to the castle training ground, an empty place, scattered with training dummies and stands with swords. Since the memories returned, he has found no peace. Day after day, he swings his sword and trains relentlessly. But from time to time, he catches himself thinking, will physical effort alone really make him stronger, especially in a world that, unlike Enkeza, does not have a level system to measure progress? The path to improving his physical abilities is obvious, simple, boring, repetitive training. But with magic, everything is much more complicated. How can he increase his magical power if he does not know how to use any magical skills at all? The memory of Enhaz surfaces, and he suddenly realizes, weapons of certain rarity have their own unique skills, so the only way forward is to train with a weapon that already contains a magical skill. He scans the arsenal, convinced that among the weapons there must be something with a magical skill. If he finds it, he will finally be able to train his hidden magical abilities, but another thought makes him freeze. His shoulders slump. He faces a harsh truth. Before chasing magical power, he must first squeeze the maximum out of his weak physical capabilities. He thinks that maybe then it will get better, and in the worst case, it will help in an emergency. With new, albeit reluctant determination, he resumes physical training, swinging the sword with all his might. Behind him, Marion watches and snorts contemptuously, unimpressed. Suddenly, a bucket falls on his head with a clatter and interrupts his swing. Shocked, he looks up, and Marion smiles and coldly remarks that he does not look surprised at all. He laughed and waved it off, saying he was just parodying some untalented person. And Marion, with a cold face, questioned his words and offered to help with training if he was really talented. Her offer left him speechless. His mind was buzzing with thoughts. He recalled details of the world he once knew as a game. Marion came from a family of knights and had incredible physical strength. Even Alexandra, who was considered the weakest heroine, possessed enormous power, and suddenly it dawned on him training with one of them could be the key to his own strength. He hesitantly asked if she really agreed to this. Marion smiled confidently and replied that she was not against it at all. When their blades clashed, he immediately felt the immense pressure of her strength and realized he had to surpass this power if he wanted to survive, while Marion, indifferent and cold, dryly pointed out his weak defense. With one powerful move, she pushed him back. The sword slipped from his hands. Pointing the blade at him, she declared him an incapable and useless prince and added that it was quite natural that everyone had abandoned him. He sat pressed against the wall, broken, her words painfully biting. Marion loomed over him, her voice dripping with contempt, and she asked if it annoyed him that May so completely humiliated him. He silently accepted the truth. Prince Gerald of this world was indeed weak, untalented, and unable to use any skill, but he was the first Gerald, not him Takabana Haruo. He was not going to sit idly like his predecessor, so he could not just give up. Just as he was finally about to act, another maid stepped between them and loudly told Marion that she had gone too far. The newcomer Monica Ashton turned around, introduced herself, and announced that from today she would be His Highness's personal maid. The announcement stunned him. In his memories of the game, Monica was supposed to be Alexander's maid, and Marion, no less shocked, angrily demanded explanations, shouting that she had been told nothing about this change. Unfazed, Monica calmly advised Marion to confirm the new arrangements with the head housekeeper, and with a sly smile, added that she was sure Marion would find her next job very pleasant, leaving the other housekeeper speechless and noticeably troubled. She got angry and stormed off, swearing that he would pay for this immediate dismissal. Meanwhile, Monica politely introduced herself to Harold and said she would accompany him as a maid when he finally married that young lady, clarifying that this transfer was the girl's own will. Still sitting on the ground with bruises from the previous fight, Harold reluctantly agreed, and Monica extended her hand, asking him to take care of her from now on. The decision about the dismissal was irreversible. Marion decisively demanded why she was being replaced, and Harold, equally stunned, asked for explanations. Monica calmly stated that she had reported all instances of Marion's disrespect to the prince and coldly, finally declared that Marion was no longer needed, leaving the others speechless. Stunned by the statement, Marion immediately rushed away, shouting that she would never forget this. Beside Harold, Monica simply watched her go with a barely noticeable, insightful smile. Her attention returned to the princess, insisted that he return to the room to immediately treat his wounds. As she helped him stand, Harold suddenly realized Monica was the first maid who had ever treated him with such kindness. When she began to thoroughly search the room, Harold asked what she was doing. Monica explained that she was looking for spicy things and was surprised that she found none. She looked under the bed and overturned his things, but there was nothing like that in the room. Finding nothing, she asked in surprise whether they were stored somewhere else. Harold insisted that there was no other place and begged her not to buy anything unnecessary, and Monica simply said that from now on she would get everything he needed. He sighed deeply, resigned himself to the situation, and told Monica that from now on he was counting on her. She replied the same and quietly added, "Please take care of me too." Later, from outside the window came Prince Harold. At the bell, Monica appeared. She entered just as he was eating, apologized for disturbing him during the meal, and delivered a message from the Chamberlain of Prince Cardis, an invitation to join the prince for dinner that evening. The name awakened an unpleasant memory. Even before the return of memories of his past life, he did everything to earn his mother's favor, even fawned over his older brother Cardis, and just the thought of it made him break out in a cold sweat. He considers the invitation and comes to the conclusion. Refusing would be worse, it would cause even bigger problems, so he decides to say that he will join. Opposite him, his brother Cardis thinks to himself that Harold can definitely be used for something. A new determination pushes him to the limit. He trains to complete exhaustion and falls to the ground only after the 1000th sword swing. He lies on the stone floor and bitterly laments. Although he started training a long time ago, he does not feel stronger. The promise he made to Alexandra weighs heavily on his heart, and unnoticed by him, Alexandra herself looks down with a thoughtful expression. His thoughts were instantly interrupted when she knelt beside him and praised him for his efforts. He shuddered, raised his eyes, and was stunned to find that she was there. She explains that a month has passed since their last meeting, and she was worried that in public it might look bad, as if they were estranged, so she came personally. Harold admits that he hadn't even thought about it, and she gently advises him to be more careful. He scolded himself in his thoughts, realizing what a fool he was so nervous around her that he missed the most important thing. Alexandra herself, and she, seeing his reaction, decided that there was no point in waiting and had to make the first move. She asks if the Chevalier family's territory is far from the capital. He, embarrassed, confirms it, but adds that because of their engagement, he moved to a townhouse closer to the city. Hearing this, she said that if he wants to see her, she would gladly come to the castle at any time, and her straightforwardness stunned him, making him wonder if Alexandra could really be interested in him. He never imagined she would go that far. He slightly recoils and repeats to himself not to jump to false conclusions after all. They only met for the second time, and Alexandra immediately notices that it seems he was just practicing sword swings. Caught off guard, he stammers and tries to divert attention, blaming everything on the weather, saying it made him want to train, awkwardly justifying that he just happened to decide to try. He listened, stunned, as Alexandra confessed everything. All her actions were for his approval, and she admitted that she wished to say it sincerely but could not do otherwise. Her words revived a memory from a month ago. Then he was told that he had no talent, and no matter how hard he tried, recognition was not destined for him, and this memory stunned him here and now. In his memory lived the promise he made, and Alexandra's voice echoed from the past into the present, as if asking if he still does everything possible to hold her back. Hearing her question, he lowered his head and admitted that he has no talent, and until now he had not truly tried. He decided that for the next 3 years he must work harder than anyone to remain her fiancée. His confession caused an unexpected offer from Alexandra. She asked to be allowed to help with his training. The offer stunned him. He had only dreamed of such a thing, but could not shake the thought that she thinks he would not manage. He immediately grabbed her by the shoulders and shouted that of course he does not think so. Embarrassed, he tried to step back, explaining that he trains for himself and is ashamed to take her time. But Alexandra gently smiled and said not to worry after all. She reminded him she is his fiancée. Her words overwhelmed him like a warm wave, and a wide pink smile blossomed on his face. He only quietly and sincerely whispered thank you. The relief did not last long. Alexandra immediately suggested arranging a small duel right now. He was still sitting on the ground and looked at her with distrust. She stood ready with a sword in her hand and told him not to worry, reminded him that last time he successfully repelled her attack, and was sure that he would show strength that would exceed her expectations. She leans very close to the frightened prince. Her face radiates passionate impatience, and she tells him to get ready. He stood stunned, not understanding at all what she meant, and she simply turned and left, saying she looked forward to seeing him tomorrow. She freezes by the gates to clearly state her intentions and assure that she will return tomorrow. Having only 3 years left, she insists that they cannot afford to lose a single day. Her words hit him with a wave of panic. He realized with horror that 3 years is terribly little, and if he does not become stronger, his future will be as bleak as in the game. Harold stands stunned. Monica steps forward, places her hands on his shoulders, and addressing Alexandra, promises to heal his highness's tired body and prepare him for the morning. Harold even blushed. She added with a sly smile that she would resort to a direct and intimate approach, and this hint instantly embarrassed Alexandra. This whole situation churns Harold's stomach. He insists that Alexandra go home, says he has an invitation to dinner from Prince Cardis in the evening and will be late, and Monica adds that no one invited her anyway. Alexandra retorts, since she is already here, why not join? Monica decisively rejects this idea, a definite no. Annoyed by the refusal, she points her finger at the surprised Prince Gerald and insists that he tell her everything that will happen at the dinner when she comes to their training tomorrow. He nervously agrees. Having obtained his consent, Monica gets to work, leads him to the door, and commands, "His Highness, prepare yourself." He nods in response, and they move inside. When Harold came to dinner, he saw another prince already at the table, hands in gloves folded together. The prince simply said he was waiting, and embarrassed Harold immediately apologized for being late. His apology hung in the air as he looked at the calm, confident face of the man. And suddenly Harold was pierced by a chilling realization. Before him stood the majestic figure of Cardis Vel de Hovels, the first prince of the kingdom of de Hovels. The first Prince Cardis Vel de Hovels is a man of impressive abilities. He already manages the political affairs of the country and is the leading contender to become the next king. But despite the enormous power he gains through the coat of arms of the Hovels, he is cold and inhumane and will definitely stand in the way of his younger brother. They considered Harold a useless younger brother, yet once Harold tried to be his servant, desperately seeking recognition. He believed that if Cardis became king, their mother would finally be seen as she truly was, and not just as a concubine. All this was just a dream, a memory from the past, and now in the present, Harold is confused. His older brother wants to have dinner with him. This had never happened before, and he does not understand the reason for this sudden invitation. Standing face to face with Cardis, the reason becomes clear. The first prince asks if it is true that Harold is engaged to the daughter of the Chevalier-Duke family. Harold instantly realizes Cardis wants to gain their support through him. Deep down, he acknowledges the correctness of these political moves. The Chevalier family is the most powerful among the nobility. Their support would ease Cardis's inheritance of the throne. But within him, a quiet, unwavering decision is born. He will no longer please his brother. Cardis clicks his tongue irritably, and the maid announces his arrival just at the moment another young man enters the room. The newcomer cheerfully greets Harold and sincerely congratulates him on his engagement. This is the second Prince Raphael Vel de Hovels, and Harold looks closely at him, knowing that despite Raphael's friendly appearance, he is actually a very calculating man. He assesses the situation. Raphael seems not to hold a grudge against him at the moment. The second prince does not seek the throne, but is passionately devoted to his mother, the second queen, and fiercely hates the first queen for oppressing her. This is the source of his opposition to Cardis. Harold decides he will be safe as long as he behaves politely. The conversation breaks off when Cardis turns to his brother with a sharp look and directly asks Raphael if he came only to congratulate Harold. And Raphael, with a quiet smile, replies with a counter-question, does he have some other plan? Harold sits tensely at the table, while Raphael cheerfully talks about his engagement to the daughter of the Chevalier-Ducal family, saying it's a miracle and he himself would want to find such a partner. And Harold, who clearly feels very awkward, only briefly agrees. The elder brother scornfully dismissed that thought, called it a farce, and said he heard from King and Queen Rosemary. Harold's proposal to the Duke Chevalier was politely declined, and Harold froze, eyes wide open in shock. Raphael intervenes, thoughtfully saying he would have acted much more decisively if he had known earlier. Then he turns the game against Cardis, saying that his elder brother also desired an engagement with the daughter of Chevalier, and was even ready to break his current engagement for it. Cardis calmly admits that this is true. Harold suddenly feels a disgusting clarity. His face darkens. He realizes that the looks of his brother and their fiancée are nothing more than tools for their rise to the throne. And Raphael, noticing his anxiety, asks what happened. He forced a tense smile, feverishly apologized, and said he felt unwell. Harold apologized, thanked for the invitation, and left early while the brothers watched him go, their faces unreadable. Walking down the corridor, he immersed himself in thought since memories of his past life returned. The concept of common sense in this world has been distorted beyond recognition. Even if here it is normal to treat women only as means to success, he swears in his soul that he will not become such a person. A painful memory surfaces. In the game world, Harold's character, desperately seeking recognition from his mother and brother, hurt his beloved Alexandra, and suddenly her image flashes before his eyes. She is in pain, clutching her chest. Clenching his fist, he hardened his resolve. He will fight against that doomed fate not only for his survival but also for the one he loves, and is determined never to see that sad expression on Alexandra's face again. When he turns to leave, a voice calls out, "Elder brother." Before him stands the fourth Prince Wilfred Well de Hovels, and Harold instantly recognizes him as the hero of Engage, Hazard, the very one whom God deprived of his attribute. He is known by another, less pleasant title, the Stained Prince, because his mother was the king's mistress. The brother approaches Harold and says he heard about the engagement and came to congratulate him. Harold, stunned, only wonders if his brother has gone mad, recalling how he, being an inept villainous prince, constantly mistreated Wilfred. Brother smiles warmly, as if confirming the greeting, and this friendly gesture is so unexpected that panic begins in Harold's soul. It seems to him as if this is some kind of reconciliation path with the game, which he had not suspected. The sight of the woman behind Wilfred suddenly shocks. It is Marion, who is now Wilfred's servant, and Harold finally understands why she was so angry with him before. He notices that Marion behaves completely differently than when she was his servant, and with bitter surprise, thinks that Wilfred is treated even worse than he himself. Perhaps the heroine is truly naturally drawn to the main character. But these thoughts are interrupted by Wilfred, who says that he must also thank Harold on behalf of Marion. His brother says that after Harold's engagement she was dismissed, so Marion became his personal servant, for which he is sincerely grateful, and Marion, blushing, replies that thanks to Harold she was able to serve her true master. As they walk together through what looks like a training yard, Harold watches them go and quietly but firmly concludes. It seems he really has no choice but to come to an understanding with the main character. Later, Harold tells Alexandra in detail about that irritating incident. Holding his breath, he listens as she vents her anger, outraged that the disgraced prince and the servant from a fallen house humiliate him so. And when Harold asks her to calm down, she quiets and seriously says that the best way to strengthen their engagement is for him to become as strong as possible as soon as possible. She says that primarily he should find a weapon that suits him better. Harold thinks. In the game world, his original weapon was a spear, but now, on his own path, he has decided otherwise and will take a shield. He announces that after a month of hard thinking, he has chosen the shield as his weapon, and Alexandra listens, her face thoughtful. She tries to comprehend his unusual choice. She listens as Harold explains his choice. He recalls that in the game, in Haza, the shield was a weapon for characters with low defense who relied on magic. But for him, the real decisive factor was much simpler. The person he loved most praised him for it. She smiles gently, says that it is a wonderful choice, and assures him someday he will definitely become known as an impregnable fortress. Moved by her words, he takes her hands, his face burning with determination. He vows that he will definitely make her stronger. Taking his oath as a sign, Alexandra announces the end of their break, says that his shield training starts right now, and he, stunned, can only beg her to be gentle. 3 months of exhausting training have passed. Harold lies on the ground completely exhausted, gasping for air, while Alexandra, though she herself was out of breath, enthusiastically notes his enormous progress. With such skill, no ordinary person could have inflicted even a single wound on him. It seems he is about to melt from fatigue. Although day after day, he endures true hell of training, from chases of demonic beasts to climbs on palace towers, and in his soul he regrets that he still cannot deflect even 20 of her attacks. She tells him to be more confident, and with barely noticeable pride adds that even among the most skilled members of the Chevalier family, only Monica can sometimes deflect her sword, and even then rarely. And this news causes a self-satisfied smile on Harold's face. His confidence quickly fades and turns into anxiety. He asks if it is really normal that she dedicates every day to his training, because he fears she might be neglecting her lessons. Alexandra simply tells him not to worry. He insists that she should not underestimate a former student. After all, in a past life he knew how important education was. Confused, she can only agree hesitantly. Alexandra declared the end of training for today and ordered him to take care of the equipment tomorrow. Harold, sprawled on the floor, barely whispered a tired agreement. He watched as Alexandra, still in training clothes, noticed that her breastplate was indispensable. When she turned to change, his gaze involuntarily followed her, and this caught him by surprise. His embarrassment did not go unnoticed. Marion appeared nearby and, slyly smiling, whispered that it seems he is in for a very fruitful night, which made him exclaim in shock. Soon, when Marion served tea to Alexandra, he sat, tormented by shame, and thought to himself that only a certain type of person could have said that, while Marion quietly giggled to herself. Calmed down and changed into formal clothes, Harold announced that he would go look for a shield that would suit him. When Alexandra asked again, he confidently stated that the best for him is the jet-black shield, Casperig, and this stunned her and Maria. Her face became serious. Alexandra spoke frankly. Casperig is an item obtained only after defeating a demonic monster on Morn Island. She warned that even 1,000 warriors could not cope with it and asked him to reconsider, because with his current strength he would only give his life in vain. He did not back down and firmly insisted that Casperig is the only option, explaining that it is a shield of the highest rarity that he could use, which could be obtained by defeating a mid-level boss with the same name, and that its unique skill, snatched through claws of darkness from afar, could steal items and had a high chance to instantly kill. He admitted that he was asking for the impossible and would not manage without their help, but he had not yet finished when Alexandra interrupted, her voice filled with emotion. What troubled her was not that the request was difficult. She was simply worried about her. Her sincere concern momentarily deprived him of words, and a tense silence froze between them. She sighed heavily and gave in. She agreed to help, but on 2 conditions: he must not try to do the impossible, and in battle he must follow her orders literally. Harold, filled with joy, instantly accepted her terms. And so their quest began. The three landed on a lush tropical shore, and Harold shielded his eyes from the sun. Harold surveyed the area and confirmed that they had arrived on Morn Island. Suddenly, a small black cat covered in spikes appeared before him and his companions, declaring that this was the boss's territory and threatening to kill them if they dared take another step forward. His eyes widened with realization. He began to suspect that this creature might be Casperig. Alexandra, however, doubted and noted that Casperig should be a large lion, not a cute little kitten, to which Marion quietly agreed. The cat bristled at their doubts, puffed out its chest, and proudly asserted that the boss was incredibly strong and terrifying, demanding that they tremble with fear. Despite his arrogance, he swiftly scooped up the creature in his arms. The cat yelped in surprise, demanding to know what he was doing, and he, pressing it to himself, asked directly, "Are you really Casper?" The monster, already recognized as Casperig, smiled mockingly. It admitted that they had seen through its mask. Harold, without unnecessary words, got down to business and asked what it knew about the very same pitch-black shield. A cunning smile appeared on Casperig's face. Casperig offered to share information, but only if they first did him a favor. They had to tear apart the vile scoundrel who dared to encroach on his territory. But Harold categorically refused the deal. When Shot Casperig asked why he refused if he wanted the shield, Harold coolly replied that he had a mountain of things he wanted, hinting that this task was not worth his time. His refusal made the cat's mask of confidence crack, and with drooping ears, Casperig replayed his legend in his mind if such a demonic creature, feared by all, was forced to ask people for help. Then something had happened that was completely out of its control. When the beast loses heart, Alexandra consults Marion. She decisively says that her own life and the lives of her loved ones are important to her, and that she cannot afford to care about the needs of a demonic monster. Marion suggests a compromise. First, scout this scoundrel to understand what they are dealing with, and confidently tells Alexandra that no monster is scary for them together, and they will immediately retreat if it becomes too dangerous. Harold is stunned, and Caspery seems to agree with the plan. They followed a small cat who announced that their prey was right ahead. Before them lay a monstrous fat pig. Its body was clean, snow-white, but its eyes were roughly sewn shut. When they saw that creature, the remains of the sacred beast, once a divine messenger, now called the gluttonous beast Henwin, Alexandra instantly called Prince Harold to retreat. But before they could move, Casperig rushed forward with a cry of revenge, swearing to avenge his mother, and the small cat was pushed aside and let out a cry of pain. He watched the little beast fall, thoughts racing. What should he do? If he leaves Casperig, he won't get the shield, and his whole survival plan will start over again. But he realized he still had one plan, and it did not depend on the shield at all. He knew that surrendering would be easier just going with the flow as before, but that was exactly why he decided otherwise. He stepped forward. Harold roared at the huge sow and demanded that she take her dirty paw off Caspery. The chaotic battle with the monstrous pig Henwin continues. Prince Harold presses his shield against its huge body. Alexandra strikes from the side, and above them Marion is thrown into the air, a living testament to the wild power of the creature. Henwin lets out a guttural roar. Alexandra freezes with a quiet smile. She thinks that Harold's actions are not courage, but simple recklessness, and yet admits to herself that this is exactly the side of him she likes, calling him hopelessly clumsy. Thoughts are cut off. Marion sighs with indignation, complaining that she will have to continue serving such a master. Embarrassed by their closeness and words, Harold suddenly changes, pulls Caspery to himself. Determination burns in his eyes, and he declares that together they will defeat that pig. Now it is their turn, and this urges Casperig forward. Categories, as Harold rushes forward with his shield raised. He knows from experience that Henwin's attacks are heavy. After enduring Alexandra's lightning attacks day after day, the beast's movements seem too slow to him. He understands that it is enough just to block and wait for a miss. From afar, Alexandra and Marion watch and agree that the creature is indeed slow. Henwin swung his huge leg loudly. Marion shouted a warning, and Harold rushed across, shouting that he would not allow the attack. The blow hit the shield with destructive force and knocked Harold back, making him cry out in pain. He slammed to the ground and groaned. Alexandra rushed to him and asked if everything was all right. He replied that it was, but Grimes admitted that his equipment had reached its limit. Seeing this, Marion decided to hold the beast herself. His thoughts race. He understands that he can fend off attacks, but does not have the strength to withstand their blow and not be knocked down. He needs better protection at least. He thinks, if only he could use that dark black shield. His gaze falls on Caspery. Staring intently at the cat, he gently strokes its head and with a serious expression clearly says, "My name is Harold, I am not human, eh?" After the formal introduction, he looks at the small creature with despair. "Hey," he begins, Whereas that pitch-black shield, Casperies. He watched intently the battle raging before him. Marion was desperately fighting the monster Henwin. If only he had a shield, he was sure he would defeat it. And in the distance, Marion shouted to Monica, who seemed to be in danger. He threw a desperate plea to the little black cat nearby, Casperig, but the creature turned away, all sweaty and hesitant. The cat finally sighed, and a dark aura flowed from its body. It agreed, but set a strict condition. Whatever the shield was, Harold must not betray it. When the dark energy swirled and disappeared, a large, luxuriously decorated shield materialized in the air, and Gerald, sitting on the ground, just stared in shock at its sudden appearance. His surprise instantly turned to disbelief when the shield rapidly shrank and stopped at a size no bigger than a smartphone, and he shouted, stunned by the tiny object hanging before him. Finally, I understood why Casperig hesitated so much. The cat explained that nothing could be done. Unlike his mother, he was still a child. He had too little mana, and this tiny shield was the best he could manage. When he realized this, suddenly a strange display with status appeared. Under the entry, mana, it simply said, "Does not exist." The text stated that in this world abilities are determined by HP and SB, and seeing this, Casperig asked what mana was, and Harold was completely confused. He stammered and whispered that he had nothing like mana, which shocked Casperig. How can people live without it? In his mind flashed the image of Alexandra, who said that mana is the life force of every creature, and without it, it is impossible to use blessings or gifts. At that moment, Harold understood everything. What in his world was called SB and skills here was called mana and blessings. With a new understanding, a cunning smile appeared on his face. He asked Casperig if mana could be transferred, and the cat confirmed that it could receive it from others. Casperig panicked, realizing Harold's intention, and warned that creating a real shield, black as pitch, would require an enormous amount of mana. Taking so much would knock Harold unconscious, but Harold indifferently ordered the cat to take as much as it wanted. He cut off all objections and, shouting Casperig, ordered to hurry. The cat just looked stunned and complained that it hadn't heeded that terrible warning. He grabbed Monica by the hand and warned her not to blame him for what would happen next. Monica clicked her tongue and waved off the creature, calling it simply a pig. When she jumped onto the beast's back with her sword raised, Harold shouted her name in horror. Meanwhile, Alexandra clenches her teeth. Her determination hardens. She declares that she will not allow the beast to touch the one dear to her, even as Henwin lets out a deafening roar. Seeing their united front, Harold rushed forward, asked if everyone was okay, and ordered to take advantage of the breakthrough they had created to stop Henwin's attacks. Alexander and Monaco agreed with confident smiles and told him, "Leave it to us." He turns his gaze to the power now in his hands in this world called Kaza. Any weapon except shields adds offensive power to the owner, and a smile of incredible ability now belonging to him spreads across his face. This power manifests as a deep black shield that directly increases defensive strength. Its effect doubles if the owner has the same attribute, and now the defense equals that of a fully upgraded highest-ranked defender. This knowledge instantly raises his confidence. He understands that this incredible defensive power gives him a chance to withstand Henwin's attacks. As he realizes this, Monica and Alexandra rise in a coordinated aerial attack and simultaneously strike the monster. Henwin howls in pain, and Harold watches them in shock. Recognition flickers in his eyes as he follows their movements. He senses the approaching danger and growls for them to hide behind him immediately. Henwin's huge jaws open, gathering swirling energy for a devastating attack. The tyrant's breath. The beast releases its power in a stream of destructive energy. Harold plants his feet firmly on the ground, taking the full blast of the explosion. He screams in pain, his body tenses under the pressure, but his will does not break. He is determined to protect them. The immense pressure still weighs on him, but he does not retreat behind the shimmering glow of his shield. Monica and Alexandra look on in horror and call his name. And when the energy stream finally subsides, Harold stands firm with a victorious smile on his face. He has withstood the attack. Raising his gaze from the ground, he sees Alexandra standing over him with a sword at the ready, and she praises him with a gentle smile for his efforts and says she will handle it herself. Her gentle expression disappears, replaced by icy rage. She swears that the brazen pig who dares to torment her fiancé will be bathed in blood, sharply ordering him to act and declaring that it is time to teach the beast manners. Harold froze, stunned by the sudden, burning change in her eyes. In an instant she lunged forward, her blade flashing in the air. A deep wound cut Henwin's side, dark blood splattered from it, and the beast recoiled. While the huge beast lies on the ground, bleeding, Harold turns his attention back to the matter and calls Casperig. "Time to avenge my mother." Black Cat materializes before him, as if asking how this can be. Casperig explains that the power dormant in Harold is his own. From the deep black shield emerges a shadowy, ghostly figure of a cat, its claws extending like. The ghostly figure sinks its claws into Henwin's massive body. This is the unique ability of the jet black shield, Snatch. It steals everything from the victim, even their very life force. The insatiable beast begins to wither as its life force is drawn out. The battle is over, the monster defeated, and the group gathers by the rough tombstone marking the final resting place. Harold kneels and gently places his hand on the stone, silently acknowledging what they have lost. He looked around and saw Casperig with closed eyes quietly whispering that he finally did it, a message for his mother. Then Harold quietly asked the cat if he remembered their promise. The cat trembles nervously and does not understand how Harold plans to deal with another demonic monster without a drop of mana to sustain his power. While Harold, with a confident smile, notices Casperig's concern and says that it is time for the final move, the cat looks distrustfully, suddenly realizing everything. He asks if Harold means him specifically when he says partner. Harold calmly says there is simply no one else. He explains, although he himself may not possess mana, he has enough of it within him for Casperig to use. He continued, a confident smile spread across his face as he posed the question to the stunned Casperig. Doesn't that mean together they can become even stronger? Playfully winking, he added that, besides, Casperig is the only weapon he truly knows how to use. Extending his fist, Harold declared that from now on he counts on him and called him a partner. After a moment of thought, Casperig decided that Harold would be useless without him and agreed to help, and the little cat lightly tapped Harold's fist with his paw, blushing slightly and quietly repeating the word partner. Alexandra, her face burning with excitement, turns to the maid. "Did you see that, Maniko? What a magnificent Prince Harold!" she exclaims. Nearby, Monica covers her mouth with her hand, a quiet, understanding laugh escaping her. She replied that she saw him, but immediately asked her mistress a question. "Oh, Desuma," Monica began, "if you had taken it seriously from the very beginning, wouldn't you have killed him right away?" Alexandra closed her eyes, agreeing. The debate continues. They say it all happened because he blocked that last blow, and she notices that there is no madness in his eyes, even though Genwon stands before him, a beast that grows stronger than him each time, and only the thought of the danger he is in makes Alexandra scream in despair. Monica's face softens. She admits that Henwin is such a powerful monster that the entire royal army had to be raised against him, and yet His Highness managed to defeat the monster. With a barely noticeable, knowing smile, she says that now she understands why her lady is so madly in love with him. Satisfied, almost confident expression appears on Alexandra's face as she considers another detail, and now they work together with Hins and Casperig-san, right? She thinks quietly, smiling. This remark makes Monica sigh and say, "You loved him from the very beginning, didn't you?" And the embarrassed Alexandra denies it, saying that he liked her too, and at the same time a picture of Harold and Casperig forming their partnership appears before her eyes. Gaze into the distance, a gentle, reminiscent smile on the face. 7 years have passed since His Highness saved me, haven't they? The history of the kingdom is rooted in myths and power. The kingdom of Dihavela was founded by a great dragon, and to this day the royal family bathes in his grace and favor. The dragon does not divide his mercy. His grace is bestowed upon both the current royal family, the Dihavelas, and the Chevalier family. Many years have passed since the founding of the country, and this deep secret, the dragon's dual favor, is known only to a few, countable on the fingers of one hand. The conversation continues, and Monica decisively states that in the Chevalier family, only Alexandra is a true dragon. She recalls how Prince Harold asked for the dragon's favor, and how Alexandra's acceptance of his handkerchief was taken as consent to become a pair. But Maniko secretly believes that the prince does not remember that gesture at all, and despite this, Alexandra presses the handkerchief to her chest with a confident smile and declares that she is perfectly fine with it just like that. It seems that it took her 6 years to reach this point. The Chevalier family's credo is that strength is justice, and the divine dragon-slaying sword Bamung is given only to the one who stands at the very top, and she, with a calm expression, swears that from now on she will be able to stand beside and protect His Highness. Monica looks admiringly at this devotion and understands the 6 years of hard work Alexandra gave to protect her chosen one. As the mistress of Bamung, her power is absolute, even stronger than her father or older brother Cedric, and Alexandra's gaze sharpens because now, as Prince Harold's abilities become known, scoundrels will surely try to harm him. Monica sighs and agrees that is exactly why Alexandra placed her beside the prince. Alexandra confirms this by telling Monica that she counts on her. Her maid takes up the duty without hesitation and swears to protect everything. Not only Alexandra, but also Prince Harold, the one who called her dear. She vows to do this for his sake, even if it costs her life. Meanwhile, in another room, Prince Harold sits at the table with Casperig. The little cat eats with enthusiasm, so Harold notes that he eats too much, and Casperig, in turn, wonders how Harold always gets such delicious food. He offers Casperig another spoonful, smiles, and says he is already getting used to it. He explains that after their battle, Casperig suggested they call each other nicknames as partners, so now they call each other Hal and Kaz. But this revelation deeply shook Alexandra. She trembles with envy, her face hidden in shadow. She is furious because Casperig managed to address Prince Harold by a nickname earlier than she could, his own fiancé. Harold recalls how Alexandra grumbled offendedly about the nicknames, but immediately corrects himself in his thoughts now he calls her Xandra. He involuntarily thinks how incredibly cute she is, no matter how many times he returns to that moment, while Alexandra, with puffed cheeks, sometimes sulks as Monica watches and smiles. She sat at the table and froze in fear when Monica spoke. Honestly, she started nudging him to ask what she meant. Casperig sat next to the plate and quietly observed. The news pushed him back. Casperig clung to his back, holding on with all his might. He stammered in agreement, and Alexandra, now beside him, calmly considered what she heard and aloud pondered the party the Marshall family was hosting. He began to object, but she did not stop and continued. The Marshall Duke's lineage was founded by the younger brother of the previous king, who renounced the royal title. By origin, they are former royal blood, so refusing their invitations would be rude. Despite her persuasion, he threw his head back in despair and got worked up, saying he did not want to go. He was most afraid of running into Cardis there, and the situation was further complicated by an important fact. Frederica, the eldest daughter of the Marshall family, was also Cardis's fiancée. She confessed a little embarrassedly that she also received an invitation. The Marshalls want to see both of them, since the engagement has already become known, so with a determined look she added that she is looking forward to meeting her future in-laws, and this surprised him greatly. Slowly he began to realize, so that's what it is, he whispered, understanding that their curiosity was quite natural, since in the future they were all destined to live in the royal palace as one family, and noticing his thoughtfulness, Alexandra asked what his decision was. He crossed his arms and considered the options, and she clearly showed her position. She firmly stated that they should go for her. It was more than a social duty. She wanted to personally make sure what kind of person Frederica was. Harold's thoughts raced. His face blushed. He panicked, trying to understand everything. Xandra invited him to a party and wants him to be her escort, and the hint that this is a date plunged him into an embarrassed spiral. He barely forms words into a coherent sentence, stumbling as he tries to ask if she will go with him. Though confused but determined, he decides to overcome his nerves and just say it. Noticing his hesitation, Alexandra firmly grabbed his hands, her face blazed with shame. She insisted that they must definitely go together, and Harold quietly agreed, while in Alexandra's mind she already called herself an idiot for such an awkward invitation. Then in the ceremonial princely attire, Harold stands by the carriage waiting. The anxiety on his face says he is not sure if this is really okay, and in the background Monica announces that she will be Australian. He stands by the open carriage door, and suddenly his name is heard from a voice. He freezes in place, turns around, eyes wide open, face still burning from nervous excitement. The voice belongs to Alexandra, who stands in an incredibly elegant dress. She gently smiles and thanks him for coming to pick her up, and Harold, stunned by her appearance, momentarily loses his speech and mentally admits to himself that her sweetness is simply killing him. Inside the carriage, a heaviness hung. Alexandra sits with her head bowed, tears running down her cheeks, and Harold silently looks at the floor with a gloomy face. Breaking the tense silence, Harold leans forward with a gentle smile, calls her by name, and extends a small wrapped box as a memento of their evening together. She raises her eyes, her face softens as she takes the box. She asks if she can open it right now. Harold instantly and joyfully agrees. Alexandra opens the gift, and before her appears a stunningly beautiful, exquisite hair ornament that sparkles in the light. Her eyes widen in amazement, and she whispers that it is incredibly beautiful. She touches the new hair ornament and asks if it suits her. Harold, blushing, explains that he chose this particular ornament because its color reminded him of her eyes. Touched, she covers her face with her hands. She sincerely thanks him for such a wonderful hair accessory, and he, stumbling over his words, insists that it suits her very well. He looked at her and wondered to himself if she really liked the gift, and he was glad that he had asked Monica for help, because he knew nothing about fashion and still remembered how she sharply criticized his first ideas. Her warm smile gave the answer he was looking for, and he suddenly realized. She had accepted him, the one known as the clumsy, villainous prince. She says that her feelings are not just because she is his fiancée. That is not enough to explain everything, because she feels that she has already received so much from him, and Harold quietly asks why she agreed to someone like him at all, but immediately brushes it off saying it was a joke, and he lacks the courage to really ask. Their intimate moment is interrupted by her announcement of their arrival. She smiles lightly, asks him to take her hand, and he accepts, quietly saying thank you. They stepped into the majestic hall buzzing with a crowd. Harold noticed, as befits the Marshall family, there were too many guests here, and people around began whispering, wondering who this mysterious companion of the princess was. His gaze runs across the room and stops on a familiar face. He sees the fourth Prince Wilfred with surprise and wonders what could have brought him here. No. Noticing his sudden tension, Alexandra anxiously asks if everything is all right, and he reassures her. No need to talk to anyone, especially Wilfred, promising that if his brother says anything, he will just ignore it, so she should not worry. At that moment, a servant announces the entrance of the first Prince Cardis and Frederica Marshall. The woman Frederica turns out to be one of the heroines of Enheza, and Harold silently freezes at her beauty. Alexandra misreads his look, thinking he likes such women, to which he quickly waves it off. Frederica approaches them, thanks them for coming, and then, turning all her attention to Alexandra, sincerely says she is glad to finally meet her. At the party, Frederica Marshall approached Harold and Alexandra. She says she heard that they are engaged. While Alexandra politely bows, Harold politely thanks Frederica for the invitation. America admits it, says that Alexandra managed to get engaged to a very wonderful person, all thanks to her. But her face suddenly twists into a malicious smile when she adds that, seeing how rudely Harold treated her before, she wants to take a little mean revenge. Alexandra shudders at the sudden change of tone, and she lightly laughed and apologized, saying she was greeting another guest. When she left, Harold quietly whispered, "Thank you," and a puzzled Alexandra asked what he was thanking for. The conversation is interrupted by a new voice. Monica, standing next to the fourth Prince Wilfred, addresses Harold in a friendly manner, "Brother Harold." Harold turned to them and directly asked what they wanted, and Wilfred calmly replied that he had noticed him from afar and just came to say hello. Harold waved him "Offend the party and don't pay attention to me," but Monica asked him to step aside. Alfred leans closer, a sly smile on his face, and hints by asking if Harold is even a little curious why he was invited. Harold, clearly irritated, insists that he is not interested at all and tries to divert Alexander. The tense atmosphere pushes Alexandra to intervene. Looking upset, she asks Harold to allow her to step away for a moment to freshen up. Wilfred and Monica watch her go with unreadable faces. He watches as she leaves, agreeing to her request. Harold anxiously notes to himself that Alexander's mood has noticeably changed with the arrival of Wilfred. She's still turning this situation over in her head, knowing it was always hard to figure out. A troubling thought flashed through his mind. He fears she might fall in love with Wilfred, just as it already happened in Ironhaz. His thoughts are interrupted by the arrival of another brother. Cardis approaches with a sly smile, says that he himself caught Harold, and asks if he had a good time. Immediately his brother Cardis approaches him, and as if nothing happened, asks if he knows that their other brother Wilfred is also here. Even before Harold could come to his senses, Cardis burst out laughing and revealed the astonishing truth. The king himself had asked him to bring Wilfred to his faction. The news clearly shocks him. Cardis continues to explain that His Majesty was concerned about Wilfred's fate and noted that he has no proper place in the palace. He presents a cunning political plan. The king cannot openly support Wilfred because of Alexander's mother, so he chose Cardis as a shield and placed Wilfred under his protection so that no one dares to move against him. Cardis adds that the purpose of the party is to announce this new arrangement to everyone, and then somewhat suspiciously asks Harold, saying that this time you responded strangely slowly to the Marshall family's invitation, so he assumed that Harold already knew what was going on. Leaning closer, he whispered that from now on Harold must also start taking care of their miserable little brother. It is his duty. And after the last farewell, he turns and leaves. As soon as the brother leaves, Harold instantly turns his gaze to Alexandra. She is calling him, and he sees that she is unwell while her maid Monica asks if something is wrong. A wave of thoughts reveals their shared embarrassment about the king's motives. Cardis admits he does not understand this risky move. Alexander wonders what could have come to their father's mind, and Harold instead decides that the king probably made a deal and seems to enjoy it. At that moment, Alexandra directly asks him how he now intends to behave with Wilfred. In Harold's soul, everything is already decided. He will do nothing. His face was drowned in shadow, and he mentally decided that whatever his brother and Wilfred do, it does not concern him. He never wants to have anything to do with him. And he bitterly recognized this feeling as envy and thought that Alexandra naturally loves the main character of this story, Wilfred. He decided that he had no other choice. Opposite him, Alexandra quietly laughed, thoughtfully putting a finger to her lips as if questioning his confidence. He ached for Alexandra. She wanted to be involved, but he could not allow it. Her word, something, echoed in his head for a long time as he watched her standing alone on the balcony, a solitary figure with a tense, anxious posture. His confusion grew, and he hesitantly asked if she had any relationship with Wilfred. Alexandra's behavior instantly hardened, and she admitted that the person she hates most in the world is Wilfred, and even if he were torn to pieces, it would not be enough to quench her hatred. Her voice dripped with poison as she spat that Wilfred is a complete scoundrel. The rage in her was such that Harold was left speechless and only whispered, "Why?" Because he recognized that expression on her face, the same one that appeared immediately after the main character condemned him. The anger disappeared from her face as quickly as it appeared. Instead, a calm smile appeared. She gently asked if he, Halsama, might remember that day 7 years ago, and he could only look in response, still trying to comprehend this sudden turn. She suggested telling about the past about that story from that day 7 years ago. With closed eyes, she recalled how he then saved everything that was important to her. Her mind, her heart, her dignity, and her very soul. And he, while she spoke, looked at their hands, which were now clasped on the balcony railing. 7 years ago, the young Alexandra lived a quiet life. Fragile since childhood, she spent her days locked at home, gazing out the window. While other children her age played together, her only adventures unfolded on the pages of books, where she traveled through fantastic worlds. And then again, one day, her father approached her with a worried expression and delivered unexpected news. She would no longer be taken to the royal palace. They said that King B. Hovels proposed her as a candidate bride for his son. Her father tried to refuse because of her fragile health, but his pleas were not heard. When young Alexandra heard this, she lowered her eyes and apologized for becoming a burden, then raised them with a gentle, tearful smile. Now Alexandra tells this memory to Prince Harold, and admits that at that time the very thought of the first visit to the capital excited her even more than the prospect of meeting the prince, which made her heart pound. At that time a maid was brushing young Alexandra's hair, who looked at her reflection with distrust. In a boyish checkered vest and shorts she asked why such clothes, and the maid only said it was the lady's order, and Alexandra was left to wonder why she had to dress like that to meet a possible fiancé. Older Alexandra explains this strange trick to Harold. She admits it was her father's idea. He believed that if she pretended to be a boy, the princes would pay less attention to her. Having stepped into the royal palace for the first time, young Alexandra froze in admiration at its splendor. The glittering halls surpassed everything she had read in books, and forgetting her father's warnings, she sneaked away to explore the vast palace on her own. She wandered deeper, feeling like the heroine of a story, but the further she went down the long, empty corridor, the more anxious she became at the absence of people. Her excitement faded, only anxiety remained, and she froze in place. Unable to move, just then a voice sounded. She looked up and saw another boy in front of her. He approached, correctly guessing that she was lost, and offered to show her the way. Alexandra, startled, quickly stood up, awkwardly insisting that everything was fine and she could stand on her own, and shook her head energetically, denying that she was lost. He calmly asked her name. After a moment of hesitation, she answered. Alex looked at her thoughtfully, as if accepting this name without any question. The fair-haired prince stopped the child who was walking away, called out, "Wait!" and then introduced himself Harold Veli D. Hovels, the third prince of this state, while the real, dark-haired Harold watched from afar. The boy Alex continues to search, overwhelmed by anxiety, despairingly realizing that he cannot find the one he is looking for, and feels as if he is only moving away from the place where he started. The prince, who called himself Gerald, watches him, thoughtfully whistling. The anxiety grew. Alex explains that it seems to him that he has been walking for more than half an hour. He tells the prince that his father must be in the room the king always uses for receiving people with abilities, and begins to doubt whether they are really going in the right direction. However, the prince smiles confidently and reassures Alex. His father is also here, so there can be no mistake. Stopping in front of the large doors, he says that this is exactly the place, and with a magical smile invites Alex to open them. Calling for his father, Alex sharply opened the heavy doors, and what appeared before him made him instantly freeze. His face became a mask of complete shock and disbelief. The boy with short, light hair sobs in despair. From above, from the doors, a child's voice mocks. "You fool! Your Highness, Gerald!" and then authoritatively adds, "Listen carefully, his name is Gerald, and if anyone should be angry, let them be angry at Gerald." Near the heavy wooden doors, he begs to be let out when he realized he was deceived. He falls into sobbing and shouts that this was not supposed to be a game, and that he hates princes. In the dark room, he does not know what to do. He crawls to a thin strip of light under the curtain, calls out if anyone is there, and desperately asks for help. Sitting down, leaning against the wall, he loses hope and fears that he might die here. Suddenly, a voice comes from behind the door. "Who is there?" The boy sharply stands up, says he is locked in, pleading for help, and the voice of a young herald replies to wait and step away from the door. In a moment, a deafening metallic rumble sounded. The door shook fiercely. The boy opened his eyes wide and looked fearfully as Herald began to break in from outside. The door finally opened with a bang. Herald appeared in the doorway with a worried expression, looked into the room and asked the boy, who was still kneeling on the floor, if he was all right. Overwhelmed with relief, the boy rushed forward and hugged Herald, sobbing that he was very scared. Herald, though embarrassed, gently patted him on the back and apologized, saying he wished he had come earlier. Finally, they both calmed down a little. Herald asks if he feels calmer now. The boy nods. Herald offers a handkerchief and quietly says there is no need to cry anymore. After a quiet "thank you," Herald gently nudges him and asks what exactly happened. The boy begins to tell about his ordeal, bowing his head. He says that he was called into this room, and as soon as he entered, they locked him inside. He continues, with pain and memories of that event in his voice. He tells Harold that the last words of that person were, "If you have to hold a grudge, hold it against this one, Harold." He stood thoughtfully, finger touching his cheek, when Raphael asked, "Did he know Lord Harold?" The young prince seemed to be searching for the right words, muttering aloud, pondering how to answer. Sudden, sharp realization shattered his thought. With a wide, eerie smile, he declared that his real name was Harold, and this revelation struck Raphael so hard that he froze in shock and screamed in disbelief. Raphael realized what was said. His shock turned into horror. He screamed as a huge wooden box, falling from somewhere above, flew straight at the unsuspecting messenger, who looked up at the very moment the box was about to fall on him. Under the rubble, the boy with short blonde hair notices that Harold the Hovels is feeling unwell and asks what happened. And Harold, sweating and grimacing in pain, waves it off and insists it's nothing. The boy covers his mouth in shock, while Harold barely tries to calm him, and behind them the boy's father watches with a knowing smile. He rushed forward, shouting Alexandra's name and asking if she was here. Seeing that two were trapped, he asked if they were okay, and his son immediately shouted to his father, pleading to quickly help Harold. After being freed, the father anxiously asks if they are both okay. Harold, already on his feet and looking quite healthy, happily says he will go. The boy is stunned. He says Harold was just injured, and instantly throws himself into his father's arms. Someone asks why he is letting Harold go, but the man simply says, "Let it be." And later Harold stands on the balcony with Alexandra. Meanwhile, the boy is seen alone. He clenches a game card with a determined expression. Alexandra explains that she now understands the place Harold held in the royal palace, and why her father stopped her that day. Harold feels it and tells himself, he is not just of royal blood, he is the bearer of the de Havel coat of arms, a power that exists only in his lineage. And he bitterly realizes that no one ever tried to see his true self. They only saw a strange, unrecognizable figure in him. About how the real Harold is truly strong, kind, and full of talent. With a determined look, Alexandra clutches the fabric near her heart and says that it was for this very reason she sought strength. He gently takes her hand, smiling, as she tells him to stay close to thank him for saving her. Harold looks back at her, eyes wide open with emotion. Standing before Alexandra's family, Harold solemnly swears. He firmly declares that he is not at all the incapable and evil prince from the rumors. He stood before Alexandra, gently holding her hands. She sincerely thanked him, saying that he was the one who saved her, and that to her he was an irreplaceable ally. Her eyes filled with tears of joy. She looked up at him with a radiant smile, and confessed that becoming his fiancée brought her true happiness. Her words stunned him. When she came to hug him on the balcony, Harold's calm finally broke, and a choked sob escaped his lips. He wept in her embrace. The burden of loneliness finally lifted from his shoulders, and suddenly he was struck by a deep realization. She knew his true nature, knew that people called him a failure and an evil prince, yet she was the only one who always looked at him and saw him as he really was. Harold, embarrassed, wiped his face with his glove and muttered that it was not out of shame. Below, Alexandra looked at him with a gentle, understanding smile. Her smile vanished, replaced by a grim, very serious expression. She looked directly at Harold and said that Wilfred de Howells tried to take advantage of her, acknowledged her only for his own benefit, and she considered that man disgusting. Harold froze, eyes wide open, unable to utter a word at her sudden revelation. She continued, doubting Wilfred's motives for such an act. Then, with unwavering determination, she pointed and said that she had already decided to dedicate everything to Harold's cause. He remained silent, pondering her words. Memories returned, and he suddenly realized. Back then he had no contact with Wilfred at all, so he decided it was better to avoid that man altogether. Alexandra, bringing his thoughts back to the present, gently reassured him. You don't need to worry about such things. Her face softened when she asked. If ever she has to confront that man, let Harold entrust it to her. It made him blush and stumble a little, but he composed himself, took her hand, and said it was time to return. She leads forward, firmly squeezing his hand to calm him. He blushed slightly and whispered quietly, "Thank you." They walk through the great hall together, and all heads turn, whispers spreading among the guests. He had already decided that the evening's affairs were over, but she firmly objects it's too early to return. He realizes she has no intention of leaving and begins to wonder what she has planned. He then suggests, if they stay longer, they should later visit the royal palace. He explains that he wants to discuss the day's events with Monica and Casperig. The proposal completely caught Alexandra by surprise. He sees Alexandra embarrassed. She agrees that they must return immediately and urges him on. In response to her haste, he desperately tries to stop her, insisting that they cannot just leave without at least informing the host. But she seems to think there is no time for such politeness. His gaze slid across the crowded room and froze on a familiar group. His brothers Wilfred and Raphael stand next to Monica and Mary. Everyone laughs together. Wilfred loudly, Raphael with a self-satisfied smile, and Mary uncovers her giggles. Harold looks at them, his face darkens, and he mutters as if he understood everything. Suddenly he feels a sharp tug on his cloak, and at that moment Casperig calls him by name. Looking down, he sees a small cat asking if he was finally let go from the party, and requests not to make such a scary face. Casperig notices that it is the first time he sees Harold talking with Alexandra, and says that for a man on a mission, he seems to be having a great time. Before he can respond, Alexandra's voice bursts in, reproaching him for frowning like a demon and attracting the attention of other guests. She quickly apologizes on his behalf. Her behavior softened, she gently took his hand and with a warm expression asked him to listen, asking if he was angry because of what she said. Embarrassed, he denied it, but inside he panicked because she saw right through him. Suddenly, behind them, the voice of Prince Raphael sounds. He calls Alexandra, asking if she and Harold are already coming, and this makes them both turn around in surprise. Harold froze speechless, enchanted by the sight of the smiling young man with light hair. Mentally, he admires how pleasant Alexandra's voice is, and only then does the question arise in his mind. Who is this person? The young man warmly greets Alexandra, calling her sister. The realization strikes Gerald like a blow to the chest, and he shouts in shock, "Brother, he." Cedric calls himself Alexandra's older brother to Harold and extends his hand. Harold, confused, says he is the fiancé and shakes it, but suddenly his palm is squeezed with crushing delight. Cedric's smile remains and malice shines in his eyes, and Harold cries out in pain. With a sly smile, Cedric explains that he is also here because he received an invitation from Prince Cardis, and admits that otherwise he would not have appeared. He turns his attention to Alexandra, takes her hands, and says that he came to see her now that she has come with Harold, and his face distorts as he reveals his true intention to interfere in their relationship, ruin Harold's reputation, and behave like an intrusive, obsessed older brother. Hearing the threat, Harold instantly stands between them, tells Alexandra that they should leave, and firmly asks Cedric to wait. The brother protests, saying that it is impossible after so many years of separation. Alexandra, however, turns to him with an icy look and coldly says that she has nothing to do with him. Stunned, he begs her and reminds her that he is the next head of the Chevalier family. Alexandra, unmoved, firmly holds Harold's hand and coldly asks if her brother has any requests for her. She clearly demands that he immediately leave them alone. She decisively adds that as the eldest daughter of the Chevalier family, her engagement to the third Prince Harold is already a settled matter. The brother loses his temper and shouts that the very fact of their union, even a little, will inevitably affect the struggle for the royal throne. He explained his calculation. Harold listened and understood that Cedric had made a deliberate move to gain influence in the royal palace, using the power of the House of Chevalier for its future leader, and Cedric declared that he was already 3 steps ahead. The prince was stunned, not understanding why now, and suspected the brothers his suspicions were confirmed when Prince Raphael appeared with a confident smile and explained that since the royal family and the Chevaliers were now connected, he was asked to add some excitement. He stood before Harold and Alexandra with crossed arms and a confident laugh. Harold insisted that he did not want to be part of the struggle for the throne, and Cedric gladly offered his help, assuring that he would do anything for his dear sister. Alexandra sharply interrupted him. Her face became firm. She said enough, and turned to Harold, asking if he was ready to go. Her brother's smile faded. He pondered the situation and believed that in the world of Inhasa survival was only possible thanks to the power of the House of Chevalier. So, as he decided, the smartest move was to make the House of Chevalier his ally. Despite this, Harold slightly tilted his head toward Alexandra and admitted that he also wanted to borrow Cedric's strength. He thought to himself that a simple bow was a small price to pay for the support of the House of Chevalier, a chance that could save him and Alexandra from disaster. Former pride, as he realized, had long disappeared. Cedric accepted the offer. Understood, he said, agreeing to give his power, but then added an important condition that made the prince look up in surprise. Suddenly changing his tone, Cedric apologized for the harshness, then coldly said that Prince Harold was known worldwide as an incompetent, vile prince, a reputation that, according to him, Harold had earned himself. Alexandra exploded with rage and demanded to know why her brother was insulted. Raphael meanwhile watched with an interested smile, and Harold froze, realizing that Cedric was hinting that he had to atone for the damage done to the name Alexandra. Cedric pointed and decisively stated the condition. In the world of Inhasa, there is an ancient ritual duel, and to gain his consent for a relationship with Alexandra, Harold would first have to defeat him in battle. He stood there, a drop of sweat gleaming on his temple as he considered the challenge. In his mind, Cedric was the boss of the event, a formidable obstacle, and he knew that his own powers were barely better than those of the heroines, so this filled him with doubts. Could he really in his current state defeat Cedric? As this question echoed in his thoughts, a voice called him, Haru-sama. Alexandra stands stubbornly and declares that she does not need a partner like a brother. With a determined sparkle in her eyes, she insists that if the House of Chevalier needs support, she will provide everything herself. Her words are cut off by the appearance of her brother, Cedric, who smiles slyly and announces that he is the next head of the family, after which Harold lowers his head and quietly yields, to Alexandra's surprise. He steps forward and directly challenges Harold. Cedric asks if Harold really intends to prove that he is a man worthy of Alexandra. When she anxiously calls Harold's name, Cedric insists that he prove his worth by crossing swords with him. Then the challenger lays out his conditions. Understanding that preparations must be made, Cedric suggests holding the duel in a month at the Chevalier family house. He, with a confident look, says he eagerly awaits their clash. Alexandra, stunned by the turn of events, calls both her brother and Harold, her voice full of panic. When Cedric leaves, Alexandra turns to Harold, her shoulders drooping to her feet, and she tells him directly that in his current state it is almost impossible for him to defeat her brother. Do you want to know why he agreed to this challenge? Why didn't he just brush off her brother's mockery? Harold looks at her intently and says he couldn't just let it go that easily. He explains that now there is no turning back. To avoid a bad outcome, he will have to become the substitute main character and marry Alexandra. They stand side by side, their hands clasped. He had a vision of a bright future, he and Alexandra laughing together in a crown, and he is determined to break free from this terrible fate to see what lies ahead with her. Now Harold leaves together with Alexandra. She looks at him with anxiety and irritation and says he is a real fool, and he simply replies, I know. On the training ground, Harold lies completely exhausted on the dirty ground. Casperig calmly settled on his chest. He exhales, whispers thanks, and admits that today is enough. Standing aside, Alexandra and Monica, with worried faces, rest their chins on their hands. Alexandra turns to her friend and asks what she thinks about what is happening. They approached Neil, who was standing nearby. Monica says that no further growth should be expected from him now, and Alexandra agrees, noting that they were both ruthless in his training. The coach's assessment struck Harold's consciousness. He stood up and realized that his physical capabilities had reached their maximum, so Alexander, noticing this, suggested switching to special technical training. While all this unfolds, Casperig sits alone and does not take his eyes off the butterfly. He thinks to himself that with this turn of events, they will finally be able to move on to the next step. Rising with new determination, Harold clenches the training sword and addresses the two women, announcing that he has a proposal regarding his future training, rather a request. Intrigued, Alexandra asked him to tell more. Harold explained that for his future sparrings he needs a partner, Casperig. He fully focuses on the cat, his face filled with hope. Hey, Kes, he asks, will you join me for a special training? The cat responds with pure joy, jumps onto the Harold's shoulder and affectionately rubs against his cheek. Of course, Casperig declares, I am your partner, Hal. On the castle battlement, Alexandra smiles approvingly. She agrees with the plan and says it's a good idea, this way he will get used to the shield. She clearly felt embarrassed by this arrangement, and Harold, already in a smart suit, confidently reassures her and promises that he himself will make her stronger so she has nothing to worry about. Her cheeks flushed, but she resolutely answered yes to his proposal. Nearby, Monica holds Casperig and with a sly smile reminds Harold that he must definitely come again to tomorrow's training. He gladly agrees, waves goodbye, and says they will see her tomorrow. When he and Monica turn away, he suggests returning to their rooms. But as soon as they start walking, he suddenly freezes, his eyes widen, shock spreads across his face. His path is blocked by the fourth Prince Wilfred, next to him the maid Marion Siler. With a neutral expression, Wilfred addresses him, Brother Harold. While Harold and Marion were preparing this separately, Prince Wilfred approached with a contemptuous smile and asked if his brother-in-law was already about to leave. But Harold sharply interrupted him and coldly stated that it was none of his business. He continues, announcing that he has been officially recognized as the right hand of Brother Cardis. Harold, with Casperig sitting on his head, looks back, his facial expression impossible to read. With an indifferent, even sigh, he said that although this benefits Wilfred, he is not interested in this matter at all. Wilfred's eye twitched, his composure momentarily shaken by such a rebuff. He does not back down and reveals that Cardis himself boasted about this appointment. Then sharply asks if Cardis ever considered Harold for this role. A memory surfaces of Cardis saying he never considered a certain person his right hand, and this hint clearly irritates Harold and Marion. He turns to Marion with a reassuring smile and tells her not to worry. With a flourish, he announces that from now on he will unite the factions and elevate Prince Cardis to new heights, and Marion looks at him, her smile tinged with skepticism. Harold interrupts Wilfred's speech with a simple, devastating statement. He is leaving their older brother's faction. This statement leaves Wilfred in complete shock. He challenges Wilfred's shock, asking if he really believes such a thing would be allowed. Pointing a finger, Harold asks what right Wilfred has to object if their brother himself agrees, and Wilfred simply laughed in response. All of this seemed absurd to him. Wilfred stood silently for a moment, chewing over Harold's words and actions, standing by the gates next to Mary. He silently considers everything. Wilfred's actions and recent events with Sandra too closely resemble Harold's behavior from his previous life, the one who also crossed to the other side. He addressed the departing Wilfred and spoke again, reminded his brother Cardis, recently appointed right hand, that it would set a terrible example for others if the third prince were allowed to behave this way. Wilfred walked away, leaving the tension unresolved. He explained to his brother, being notoriously known as a clumsy and evil prince, he has no one to compare himself to, so it is impossible to determine his position, and with a confident smile, told Wilfred to stop pretending he was being dragged down, and asked why he suddenly cared about this. After that, he turned and left, saying he was setting off. Behind him, Wilfred Marion could only watch. Absolute shock and despair were written on his face. When they were leaving, Marion calmly asked if she should kill Wilfred. Harold flinched, quickly ordered her to calm down, and Casperig, agitated, hissed into his shoulder. Since then, a new training regime began. Harold found himself sparring with a powerful young woman, her strong strike threw him onto a stone parapet, and Marion watched from afar. The knight did not miss the opportunity and rushed with a massive sword, and Harold barely managed to block the blow. His eyes widened in shock at her incredible strength. The exhausting training drained all his strength. He sank down, leaning against the wall outside the castle. Casperig rushed to him, shouted his name, his voice trembling with anxiety. The opponent approached, sword in hand, and asked if he was finished. Harold wiped a trickle of blood from his lip, clenched his teeth, and forcing himself to stand, replied that he was not finished yet. She met his audacity with a confident smile, promising that if he did not come to her, she would definitely defeat him and show true strength. After some time, the carriage rattled along the road, taking its passengers away from the familiar city. The carriage brought them to a new city. Harold sat, looking at the wide landscape, trembling with excitement. Casperig noted that it looked fun, and Harold readily agreed with a broad smile. A month after that party where the duel with Cedric was decided, Marion Siler talked with the anxious Harold D. Hovels. She calms him down, explains that she trained Alexandra all month, and that it was because of these trainings that he was able to fend off her attacks, so there is no need to worry so much. He playfully pouts and jokes that he supports his dear subordinate, but Harold does not feel true trust. He recalls the past month, the hellish training during which he still could not fend off 4 attacks from Alexander. The tension in the air, he quietly mutters that he understood. Marion took advantage of the moment, leaned close, winked, and promised to prepare a special reward for him when he defeats Cedric, and her teasing only further unsettles Harold. The conversation is interrupted by the appearance of Alexandra Chevalier in an elegant dress she calls hell, smiles warmly, says she was waiting, and then gracefully gestures to invite him to follow her. Leads them through the lavish doors, gently inviting them inside. When Harold steps in, Casperig comes alive on his head, and beyond the threshold Wilfred Welde Hovels awaits them. He greets Harold with a pleasant smile and says he has been waiting for him. He extends his hand, politely greets Harold, and says he eagerly awaits their matter. Harold is impressed by this gesture. His own hand faintly glowing, he hesitates, thinking Wilfred stands too close, but awkwardly accepts the handshake. During the conversation, Alexandra intervened with a stern expression, noting that Halsam had just arrived, and Wilfred turned to her with a smile and agreed indifferently, as if it was of no importance. After some time, the group was already sitting together. While Marion was serving drinks to Alexandra Pet's Casperig, Wilfred suddenly snapped his fingers. Something occurred to him, and he remarked that they had not yet decided the terms of the upcoming duel. Then he directs his attention straight to the clearly troubled Alexandra, and with a confident look, declares that this duel is just for her, causing her to flinch. Wilfred explains vividly. This match is a way to understand if Harold is suitable for Alexandra. He looks him straight in the eyes and says that to prove this, he wants Harold to show his determination and his feelings for her. He listened as Wilfred Kamlai laid out the terms of the duel. If Wilfred wins, he will not only bless the engagement of Harold and Alexandra, but also, as the future head of the Chevalier family, promise his full and unwavering support. Harold, alongside the worried Alexandra and surprised Marion, requested another part of the agreement, putting forward his condition with unwavering determination. If he wins, Wilfred must personally ask the king to cancel his engagement to Alexandra. Before Wilfred could respond, Alexandra jumped to her feet and shouted loudly for them to wait. She demanded to take Harold's place in the duel, insisting that even if his victory was certain, she could not agree to a condition that so deeply humiliated her brother and this embarrassed Wilfred, who objected that her interference would render the entire agreement meaningless. Harold gently placed his hand on Alexandra's shoulder, and her protest quieted. He calmly said he understood everything and that everything was fine, and Alexandra turned to him and raised her eyes, seeking confirmation if he was truly confident in his decision. Kneeling before Alexandra, Harold de Hovels takes her hand and with a confident smile calls her Xandra, explaining that he endured a month of exhausting special training precisely for this moment. The players were certain, thanks to his preparation, whatever the conditions of their duel, he would definitely not lose. Alexandra looks back at him, a gentle, slightly surprised smile playing on her lips. Behind the shine of outward confidence hides a deeper truth. He admits to himself that he wants to run away, but cannot. He is Harold Welde Hovels, known as the fraudulent dog, the weakest of all. His thoughts return to the opponent, Cedric Chevalier, standing ready with a curved blade. Harold knows that against such a strong enemy who does not yield to the heroine, he has no chance in an honest fight. It seems Patrick has already made a decision. He admits that although this is the only way, it is okay. With a calm smile, he accepts the challenge and says, "Let's begin." Now they stand face to face in the courtyard, and Cedric says he has already explained the circumstances, but now wants to know how determined Harold is and what he thinks about it. The opponent draws his weapon, and Harold's eyes narrow in recognition. He knows that distinctive blade. It is Cedric's personal weapon, Kurnai Bayaka, Crimson White Flower. The sword is known for its first-class attack and curse effect, and its unique technique Kurenai Ranbu, Purple Wild Dance, is a masterful move that delivers 5 consecutive strikes in one smooth motion. The truth dawns on Harold. Cedric is not just trying to win, he intends to kill him. One miss and it's the end, but despite this terrible revelation, an ironic smile appears on his lips because he understands. This was Cedric's plan from the very beginning. He calls Casperig. The cat instantly materializes on his shoulder. Harold asks him to fight alongside. Casperig gladly agrees and declares himself house partner, and with his partner beside him, Harold crouches, dark energy swirling around, preparing for the deadly duel. He stood opposite his opponent Cedric, who looked at him with distrust. Cedric asked in surprise if Harold really intended to fight him, addressing him as Your Highness. Cedric's face stiffened as he gripped the sword's hilt. He said that since Harold had already decided he would receive a warning, but he would not hold back. He replied that he was fine with that. Clutching Casperig's weapon, Harold loudly declared that he and his partner would snatch victory together. When the fighters lined up, Marion Sailor announced the duel's condition. Whoever wins will receive official recognition of engagement to Alexandra. With a sharp gesture, she shouted to start the match. As soon as the word was spoken, Cedric dashed forward with dazzling speed, and Harold's eyes widened in shock. He realized that the opponent was using some form of physical enhancement. The prince barely raised his weapon and parried the swift overhead strike. The force of the blow was palpable, but his defense held. Smirking cunningly, feeling the power given to him by Casperig, he thought that with such an overwhelming advantage in both speed and strength, victory was inevitable, and after deflecting another strike, he told Cedric that defeating him would not be so easy. In response, Cedric unleashed his signature move Karin Ironbu. A fierce wave of blade strikes crashed down on Harold and did not relent. During the attack, Cedric mockingly asked what was wrong while Harold barely defended against the relentless storm of steel. Cedric Chevalier laughs maniacally, increasing pressure on Harold D. Hovels. Under a shower of sparks, Harold strains to block a heavy blow. Gritting his teeth, Harold endures while Cedric taunts and asks, "What's wrong?" Retreating to gain distance, he was stunned by the power of the attack. Cedric froze on alert, admitting to himself that he did not expect such agility from Lord Harold. Casperig urgently whispers in his ear that now is his chance, and the cat insists, "Use your snatch skill and finish it in one move." Harold decisively said that he would not use the snatch move in his duel. The snatch ability in question is incredibly powerful. It is a long-range attack with an instant death effect that can be used even during defense. That is precisely why he will not use it. He is firmly determined to achieve a complete and total victory over Cedric without relying on such a technique. His eyes narrow, filled with determination. He trained specifically for this moment and vows to see it through. Alexandra and Marion watch anxiously from the side, whispering his name. In response, Cedric began to gather his own power, his sword ignited with colossal energy. A confident, cruel smile spread across his face as he prepared to unleash his final move. He lunged forward, releasing a huge wave of crimson energy, double slash of the Crimson Lotus, and Harold tensed, his own weapon flaring with dark power to meet the devastating attack head-on. He braced himself, preparing for the incoming attack. From the side, Casperig watched silently, thinking it was a pity, but yielding to a partner's whims was part of Harold's role. Feeling this thought, Harold mentally cursed the creature, calling him a bad cat. Holding the sword firmly, he looked the enemy in the eyes, his gaze blazing with defiance, and he growled a challenge to Cedric, swearing to repel the attack. Two blades clashed with a deafening roar. At the point of impact, a shockwave burst forth. Harold's sword withstood the crimson energy of Cedric's technique. Stunned that his attack was stopped, Cedric only gritted his teeth and called him a fool. Cedric could react. Harold struck with a free fist straight to the face. The force of the unexpected blow threw Cedric backward. He spun in the air, and the sudden tension left Harold gasping, sweat dripping down his forehead as he caught his breath. With a savage, triumphant smile, Harold de Hovels stood over the kneeling Cedric Chevalier and declared that the duel was won, the victory absolute. The triumphant mood vanished in an instant and was replaced by a look of slight concern. Casperig, perched on his head, seemed to be reporting. Meanwhile, Cedric, crossing his arms, confidently stated that his talents were more in domestic affairs than in martial arts, and that the result of their duel should be considered a true measure of his skills, while nearby Alexandra scolded the irritated Wilfred, reproaching him that his behavior was unbecoming and that he should simply acknowledge Harold's strength. Finally, he seemed to give up, rubbing his eye in frustration. He admitted defeat and regretted being too soft on his sister. Harold smiled understandingly, thinking about another of Cedric's abilities, the amplifier. He continued, telling Harold that although it was a pity, his final strike was light and would not have passed on a real battlefield, insisting that Harold should have taken up a weapon, but Harold calmly replied that there was no need. The opponent pressed, "Does Harold look down on him because he does not use a sword, bow, or even magic?" Harold simply said that he was mistaken. He explains with a confident smile, on the sides Marion and Alexandra. Alexandra is his sword, Monica is his bow, and Casperig is his magic. He himself does not need those skills because they are all beside him. As long as he has a shield, he can protect them. Cedric listens, a quiet, understanding smile playing on his lips as he realizes this. In Harold's mind is a clear, unwavering determination. He will protect them. That is why he chose to become the shield. Taking advantage of the silence, Cedric solemnly addresses him. Lord Harold, in response, turns with his companions and simply replies, "Yes." Cedric bowed deeply before Harold, a sign of sincere respect, and lowering his head spoke a solemn request. "Please take care of my sister Alexandra." Harold stood, stunned by this sudden plea. Responding to the request with unwavering determination, clenching his fist, Harold exclaims, "Yes, I will definitely make Sandra happy." Alexandra instantly hugged him tightly, shining with delight, and exclaimed how happy she was about their shared future. Marion joined with a warm smile, and Harold found himself confused between the two women. A few days after the duel, within the walls of the academy, Wilfred sits at a table, and sighs heavily. Fatigue is evident in his eyes. reflecting on the recent turn of events, especially that Alexandra got engaged to the notoriously inept Prince Wilfred, recalled his shock when he heard the news, and admitted he was so stunned that he did not even dare to oppose the contract with the royal family. There are grounds to believe that the only possible fiancé for Alexandra could be someone from the royal family, but he cannot shake the feeling that Prince Harold is the wrong choice. Wilfred believes that his own family, the Chevalier house, was pressured into agreeing to the engagement, and they had no other option but to accept. He directly addressed Harold and voiced his opinion about the prince aloud. Wilfred said that the whole country knows about that incompetent, infamous prince. Before the nobles he is arrogant and condescending, and before those he considers inferior, he is sycophantic. He smiles with a sly, understanding look, and decides that the entire duel was just a performance. But Wilfred admits that through this performance Harold did show his determination as Alexandra's fiancé. Cedric Chevalier stands alone, a quiet, humble smile on his face. He acknowledges his defeat before Prince Harold and decides to accept it by congratulating Alexandra on the engagement. Calm shattered instantly, he slammed his fist on the table and, overwhelmed with rage, realized he would never truly be able to bless them. In his mind flashed the image of a happy Harold and Alexandra, and from now on he vowed to protect his little sister. If Alexandra shows even the slightest unfitness, he will take everything off the boat. During the meal, Alexandra leaned toward Harold and offered to feed him. Confused by her closeness, Harold agreed, and nearby Monica noticed that although the closeness was acceptable, the prince looked somewhat troubled. So she also offered to help with the food and said it was her duty. Before Monica could react, Alexandra insisted. As his fiancée, she must feed him. The two women looked at each other hostilely over the confused Harold, who just wanted to eat, and this confrontation was interrupted by a nervous maid who apologized for the intrusion and informed them that Prince Cardis had summoned Prince Harold. Harold pondered the summons, wondering if Cardis intended to form a faction or say something foolish. Dismissing the thought, he calmly told the maid he understood and would go immediately. As she was about to leave, Alexandra decisively declared that if he had a meeting with Prince Cardis, she must accompany him as his fiancée. She suspects that Cardis also has some plans regarding the Chevalier family. He looks at her tenderly, understanding that she wants to be near so that no one unjustly blames him, and mentally tells himself, she really is a good fiancée. The realization overwhelms him with a wave of emotions, and he covers his face. Alexandra, worried, asks what happened, but he quickly brushes it off, insisting it is nothing. Later, Harold enters the office where Prince Cardis sits waiting with clenched hands and a grim face. Harold says he is coming, but what exactly he means is unclear. Cardis sharply raises his gaze. He addresses Harold directly and says he believes Harold knows why he was summoned. Alexandra silently stands behind Harold. Her face is just as serious. In anger, he lunged at Harold and shouted how it could be that someone, torn from his faction and supposedly powerless, even dared to challenge him for the throne. Pointing at him with an accusing finger, he reminds Harold that they are both sons of the same mother, meaning he is the third prince, and asks why Harold is now betraying him. Harold calmly returns the question. He presses further, asking why Cardis would ask him to join his faction, even if the king himself requested it, when it is already obvious that Cardis despises him more than anyone else. Harold directly asked if his brother even knows about that deep hostility within himself. This left Cardis speechless, his eyes wide open in surprise. Feeling the misunderstanding, he instantly, almost maniacally, clarifies that this is not what Cardis thinks, and decisively says that he is not going to side with their other brother, Wilfred, and will never help him. While Cardis stammers and begs to wait, Harold turns his back as if to say the conversation is over. He tells Alexandra that they are leaving, and she agrees, while Cardis only shouts after them in despair as they walk away. Their departure is interrupted by a cheerful voice. The second Prince Raphael appears before them with a bright smile and says he was waiting for Harold. Genuine surprise is visible on his face. A cheerful greeting sounded. Raphael, Harold, and Alexandra turn and see the second prince approaching. And Raphael says he heard that Harold was summoned because of his impressive swordsmanship and came himself to see what was happening. He continued with a bright smile, explaining that he heard about it from a maid, gesturing towards the shocked Monica, then innocently asked Harold what business he had with his elder brother. Suddenly, Harold realizes where he is. His eyes widen in shock. He finally understands what he has been dragged into, and behind him looms a furious Cardis. The mother's face twists with rage, and Cardis accusatorily points at Harold, demanding to know if he intends to betray his own blood and unite with Raphael. He lowers his gaze, a shadow passes over his face, and quietly confirms, "Exactly so." Raphael watches the conversation with a gentle, understanding smile. She turns to Alexandra and sighs, exhausted. Betrayal. Let's go, Sandra, I can't endure this anymore, she calmly agrees. They turn to leave and Cardis explodes, pointing after them. If that is your intention, I have my own plans. Don't think this is the end. Raphael pays no attention to the outburst of indignation, cheerfully stands before Harold and says that, as his brother said, Harold should join him, then leans closer and jokingly asks if Harold can't stand him. He winked, smiling reassuringly. At least you don't hate me, he says, then adds, more than you hate Cardis, right? The cheerful expression fades and turns into a quiet, tense seriousness. You know that my mother, like my brother Cardis, is Her Majesty Margaret, right? He asks. Harold flinches, stunned by this revelation, and Raphael insists. So why are you asking me about this, Harold? Harold froze, sudden panic gripped him, he had let something slip. Everything he knew about Raphael's past came only from the world's basic settings, and Raphael, looking with a gaze as if he knew everything, coldly pointed out that Harold was not supposed to say that. He hurriedly tried to cover his mistake, justifying that he noticed how badly the environment treated their mother, the queen, and so he thought that Raphael and Cardis were taking advantage of this. Raphael smiled and remarked that Harold was completely absurd. Raphael casually brushed off the topic, and coldly added that if Harold himself was not going to intervene, then they had no real reason to become enemies. He insisted, saying that now that Harold understood their situation, there was no need to be so wary. Harold hesitated, agreeing that this might be true, but remained uncertain. Harold's thoughts returned again to the very root of the conflict. He remembered that it started when Cardis dragged Wilfred into his schemes, and Cardis' own words confirmed this. He grabbed his head, irritated. Cardis made it clear, if Harold left this matter, he would take revenge, and this threat made Harold feel trapped. Feeling the storm in his soul, Raphael extended his hand and offered another way. Join me and I will protect you. Harold considered this offer but said he had one request first. Raphael doubted, wouldn't it be better for his future to just agree? Harold, with unwavering determination, replied that it was absolutely necessary. However, his confidence was unshakable. He foresaw that over time, Raphael would inevitably become an ally of Wilfred and form a powerful faction. So he confidently came to the conclusion, approaching Raphael is a bad idea. Harold reflects on Raphael's true intentions and suddenly realizes that the prince's request was not just an appeal, but a cunning move to draw the influential Chevalier family into his circle. He holds Alexander's hand, and his determination hardens. Although avoiding his own terrible fate is important to him, the thought that someone might harm her or her family fills him with even greater disgust. Alexandra, sensing his tension, looks up at him, her cheeks burning and in her gaze slight surprise. He turns his attention back to the conversation. Harold explains to Raphael that he is not just reserved, and Raphael's smile does not fade. He insists, asking if this is a refusal and whether Harold himself intends to claim the throne. He slightly tilts his head, and his position becomes indisputable. He does not intend to interfere in the struggle for the throne and will not give his support to any faction. Raphael raises his hands in a gesture of concession. The smile does not disappear. He acknowledges Harold's determination and says that if he is truly steadfast, then there is nothing to be done. He will for now refuse his offer. Then he unexpectedly adds a proposal. If Harold ever gets into trouble, he should seek him out, since they are brothers. This sincerity so throws Harold off balance that he is silent for a moment, fists clenched in surprise. Elsewhere, Alexandra's face burns with emotion. She presses her hands to her chest and thinks to herself, for Harold's sake, I will endure everything. Her determination turned into action. After the duel with Cedric, Harold's training was intensified fivefold for a whole month. He lies exhausted on the floor, and Alexander sits on his back, making the trial harder. Casperig taps him on the head, encouraging him, and Harold only groans that such overwork will ruin him. To continue raising the level, Harold stubbornly continues special training, mastering the jet black scythe Casperig. The weapon, which now appears as a huge claw, has significantly strengthened. He indisputably dodges its sweeping attacks when Casperig is in his small cat form, watches with amusement. During the session, Alexandra approaches him with rosy cheeks and sincerely thanks him for how strong he has become. He noticeably blushes from her pressure, and when she playfully pokes him in the cheek, he feels that she is behaving too familiarly. The moment was interrupted by the appearance of Monica. She ran in and announced that she brings an order from the king himself to appear immediately for an audience. Surprised, Harold asks what it is about. He anxiously contemplates his question, thinking that the summons probably has nothing to do with Prince Cardis, and this thought slightly eases Harold's troubled gaze. To get to work, he hastily informs the others that he himself will go to the place where the king is and asks them to wait, not rushing to the audience hall. In the throne room, King D. Hovel sits on the throne and with a heavy look begins to explain why he summoned them. He announces important news to the four gathered princes Raphael, Wilfred, Harold, and Cardis. Accusations from the Valti and Holy Kingdom are being sent to their country. The announcement caught Harold by surprise. He was expecting a lecture, but this was something entirely different, and his thoughts race as he considers the consequences of the visit from the Holy Kingdom of Volscia. The Altian Holy Kingdom, the heart of the church that governs the faith of this world. This is the main stage of the story he knows, and it is from here that the heroine is supposed to appear. She will come to the Royal Academy as an exchange student, Saint Christia, accompanied by her follower, the Holy Knight Cauder del Mio. Christia herself, like a saint, a heroine filled with selfless devotion and love. Surrounded by gentle beings on a peaceful field, she appears for the first time in this new reality. Harold thoughtfully awaited the appearance of the game's heroine, but another figure emerged in his imagination, Carla, the so-called Katsukuro heroine, a woman whose most memorable moments were connected with being taken captive, and she defiantly shouted to the executioners, "Kill me." Well, while gloomy memories gnawed at his thoughts, the hearings in the throne room did not cease. Carter stepped forward and asked the father if they were summoned to serve as escorts for the legations. Meanwhile, Harold tried to concentrate, knowing that now was not the time for distractions. The king acknowledged the directness of the question and explained that usually he would have turned to either Cardis or Raphael, but this visit was intended only to establish good relations. So, with a confident smile, he announced that he entrusted the escort of the delegation to Wilfred. The decision stunned Cardis. He immediately noted that Wilfred was only 13 and had never before performed such a service for the royal family. Meanwhile, Harold felt a wave of relief, deciding that this meant his non-involvement. The queen agreed with Cardis, saying that this responsibility was too heavy, but the king was unyielding. Precisely because of the weight of the duty, it was time for Wilfred to begin fulfilling the duties of a prince. Then he turned to his eldest son and ordered Cardis to help Wilfred after all. He was supposed to be by his side, and Cardis only bowed his head in agreement. The king ran his hand over his chin, thinking that perhaps King Ibel had foreseen this development and deliberately introduced Wilfred into Cardis's ranks. From his place, Gerald watched his father's calculations with a grim expression. At that moment, Raphael addressed the king. If the goal was to give Wilfred experience, let his peer Harold join him and they would perform the escort together. This proposal froze Harold in silent, wide-eyed horror. His composure completely shattered. "Wait," he shouted, raising his hands in desperate protest. He insisted that such a great responsibility was not for him and categorically refused, while the king simply looked at him with a thoughtful expression. He was internally stunned when his father, King D. Hovels, announced that Raphael's proposal was the wisest. The king told Harold not to think too long and added that Raphael did not need to explain anything further, which only increased the second prince's self-satisfaction. The matter was settled. The king solemnly announced that the task of escorting the delegation of the Holy Kingdom of Volscia would be carried out together by Harold and Wilfred. The younger Prince Wilfred stood with a stern and determined expression, while Harold's face was a complete mask of defeat. Later, in a quiet room, a long, drawn-out sigh of despair quietly echoed. The sigh escaped from Harold, who was sitting next to Alexandra and her maid Marion. Noticing his gloom, Alexandra asked what had happened, and Marion calmly explained the new arrangement. Harold would join Prince Wilfred as an escort, and Prince Cardis would be in reserve, and this news clearly surprised Alexandra. Terrible consequences spun in his head. He understood that his direct intervention could jeopardize Alexandra's engagement and expose him as a cunning, selfish intriguer. He voiced his anxieties aloud. He was entrusted with escorting the saint, and he firmly said that he was completely unable to bear such responsibility alone. Alexandra meanwhile looked at him as if comparing him to Wilfred and gently asked him to stop belittling himself. His panic grew as he clenched his hands. He begged, saying that standing simultaneously before the saint and Alexandra was an impossible nightmare. Seeing his sincere confusion, Alexandra covered her mouth to suppress a giggle. Although embarrassed, Harold nervously agrees to take on the responsibility, and his reluctant determination amuses Alexandra, who, turning to Marion with a confident smile, declares that they will use this opportunity to show the whole kingdom which of the two princes is truly better. In the palace, two officials were discussing preparations for the arrival of the envoy, and one remarked, "Although everything is moving forward, in reality, all the work is done entirely by the ministers of foreign affairs." Prince Harold listens with a furrowed brow, taps his finger on his chin, and thinks to himself that leaving such matters entirely to others could become a problem this will not do. In another part of the room, Prince Cardis, furious, slaps his hands on the table, and shouts that their kingdom is being made a laughingstock by these rural bumpkins. Sudden outburst of voice draws Harold's attention while the official is sorting through papers. Harold decisively decides to offer a helping hand himself. Harold approaches the official with slick-back hair, who turns around surprised. Harold says that such work is better done with greater forces and offers to give half of his men for it. The official freezes in astonishment, not believing the prince's proposal. The official is deeply moved and warmly thanks him. Harold simply tells him, "Leave it to me." Harold's expression is determined. A deep relief appears on the official's face. Next time, Prince Raphael greets Harold with a smile and asks how the preparations are progressing. Harold, clearly irritated, replies that the servants and ministers are working, not him, to which Raphael retorts that Harold himself behaves like a servant, managing them, and points to their brother Wilfred, who gives orders to Marion, noting that Wilfred's approach is completely different. He continues, insisting that if someone in his place interfered, it would only create confusion. He says he simply politely stays aside. Harold looks confused by his brother's logic. Ignoring the comment, Harold turned back to the officials and said that regarding the postponement of the bill, everything has already been agreed with Minister Olson and the ministry staff, and with a confident smile, assured them that everything is settled. Elsewhere, an official in a wig is talking alone with Cedric Chevalier. He thanks him, saying that thanks to Lord Cedric's help, everything is going smoothly. Cedric raises a finger to his lips, with a pleasant but unreadable smile on his face. He approached Harold with an understanding smile and noted how well the members of the House of Chevalier treat the young prince. Harold, standing nearby, responded with a restrained glance. Behind the neighboring pillar, Alexandra Chevalier peeked out. Her face instantly blushed. She realized she had been noticed. He was interrupted, but Cedric paid no attention and continued his proposal, insisting that Harold join him. He promised that together they could make much better use of Harold's talents. He responded with a tense smile, scratched the back of his head, and reminded Cedric that he had already declined the offer. But Cedric did not back down. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a barely audible whisper, and he said directly, "I want you to hear me." The moment of tension was abruptly broken by a servant who called Prince Harold. He raised his hands as if surrendering and took the opportunity to leave with relief, while in the background Alexandra, arms crossed, looked on with obvious irritation. As Harold walked away, Cedric shouted after him, urging him to seriously reconsider the proposal. Then Cedric stood and watched Harold depart, a confident, calculated smile playing on his lips. Later, Harold stood with his brothers when they were officially informed that the envoy of the Holy Kingdom of Volscia had entered the capital and would soon arrive at the palace. And Harold's face grew somber. He anticipated this meeting. His brother Wilfred turned to him with a bright smile and pointed out that the Pope himself was leading the delegation. He insisted that despite their past problems, everyone needed to cooperate to ensure the reception was successful. To emphasize his words, Wilfred suddenly grabbed Harold's gloved hand, causing him to flinch. He held his brother's hand firmly and suggested that they all join forces to give Wilfred a grand welcome. Raphael smiled ironically, and Cardis turned away in disgust. And at that moment, the magnificent procession of knights on horseback began to arrive, greeted by the roar of the crowd. He stood with his brothers before the grand carriage when the voice of a servant cut through the air and announced the arrival of the envoy from the Volscian Holy Kingdom. He stepped forward with a polished smile, addressed the one hiding in the carriage, welcomed His Holiness the Pope to the Kingdom of De Havel, and introduced himself as the fourth Prince Wilfred, offering to accompany him. Harold watched, a look of embarrassment flashing across his face. He did not understand why no one was coming out, and after a brief moment of hesitation, he bowed slightly and introduced himself. The third Prince, Harold. On the door of the carriage, Holy Knight, Coward El-Mia, stands across the path of Prince Wilfred with a stern expression on his face and orders him not to approach. And Wilfred, outraged, shouts at her and calls her actions insolent. In the heat of the confrontation, Prince Harold mentally notes, "This is typical behavior of Carla as a holy knight. She simply fulfills her duty to protect, regardless of whether a royal person or a common criminal stands before her." Coward El Stenderground continues his internal count, confident that Carla's pride and knight spirit will never allow her to betray them, and a quiet, satisfied smile plays on his lips. A voice sounded from the carriage. It was Saint Christia, who gently reproaches Carla for rudeness, then addresses Princes Harold and Wilfred and orders them to apologize immediately. When she appears, Harold instantly recognizes her. Christia Celino. A memory surfaces. In the world of Tenbaza, she was a heroine with the worst character, but the only one with skills to restore and heal statuses, so she was considered the most powerful support. Stia looks at her knight with displeasure and asks if she did not hear her order. She decisively states that she will not allow any disrespect towards the princes of the kingdom of Havel. Cowardle is silent, his gaze lowered. In response to the public reprimand, Holy Knight slightly bows her head and quietly apologizes. Harold watches this scene with a sly smile. He sees that Christia's attitude is not due to lack of tact, but a deliberate act. She specifically scolded her knight in front of everyone, thereby confirming his belief that her nature is truly vile. Having made it clear who is in charge here, Christia turns to Wilfred with a charming smile and extends her hand to him. Completely enchanted, Wilfred gracefully accepts it. Harold concludes that Christia's character is as treacherous as the original story hinted, and that her scolding of Cowardle was a test for him and Wilfred. But his thoughts are instantly cut off when Christia addresses him directly and asks about Papa. Embarrassed Harold only stammered and apologized. He stands next to a young man who says that due to Papa's poor health, he and Christia arrived as representatives of the Salvator family. The man calls himself Lorenzo. Aye, Salvator, this name sounds shockingly familiar to the Herald. Lorenzo and the name echoes in his head, bringing to the surface knowledge from a past life. Lorenzo is the one behind the Saint Disabduction incident. In the game Inhasa, a conspiracy created to seize power over the Holy Kingdom. He cheerfully suggests taking them all to the king, and Harold just watches. A cold premonition washing over him, he understands that something big is about to happen. Marion turned to Harold with a soft look and began to apologize for what happened earlier. But Harold, confused and with his head full of thoughts, barely heard her words. He thanks her, saying that he is used to such things, but in his soul he admits he has no idea what lies ahead. His stream of thoughts breaks when he sees Lorenzo firmly grasping Christia's hand. Mary notices his reaction and asks if everything is all right, but he quickly pretends nothing is wrong. The group steps into the magnificent throne hall. King Havel sits on the throne and greets the delegation from distant lands with open arms. Lorenzo steps forward and bows slightly. He sincerely thanks for the warm welcome and says he is filled with joy at the prospect that this visit will lead to stronger, unshakable relations between the kingdom of Havel and the Holy Barshan Kingdom. The king smiles in response and asks them to feel at home while they are here. Harold sighs lightly with relief, thinking that all that remains is to escort the delegation to the chambers and let them have free time before the evening part. Lorenzo turned to Christia with a charming smile and offered to personally escort her to the room. She politely thanked him, but when he turned away, the smile tightened, and he threw out one sinister word, but her gift remains a gift. Her gaze stops on Harold, a light blush plays on her cheeks. She asks, after all, this is a special occasion. She would be delighted if Prince Harold himself became her escort. Prince Harold de Govel trembles, cold sweat runs down his forehead, and St. Christia clings to his hand with a dazzling smile. It is a terrible situation. He sharply feels that everyone is looking exactly at them, and from behind a nearby column, Princess Alexandra watches the scene with a face in complete shock. She squeezes his hand a little tighter, raises her eyes to him, and tears gather in them. With a soft, pleading voice, she asks if he really will not escort her. He stammers, cannot refuse such a gesture, takes her hand, forces himself to smile, and says that it would be an honor for him. Nearby, Lorenzo Salvator watches them with a sly smile, and the anxiety of Princess Alexandra seems to appear as a crack on the very column behind which she hides. Side by side, they walked through the great hall, followed by attendants. Christia did not hide her admiration for the splendor of the royal palace of Havel, and Harold, still noticeably tense, politely said, "Thank you." She approaches closer with a playful sparkle in her eyes and asks how Prince Harold usually spends his days here. Before he can answer, she notes that for the past few months he has been spending every day with his fiancée, diligently attending her elemental magic classes. He was sure that Christia should not know about such things. When he saw her barely noticeable, triumphant smile, he was overwhelmed by a terrible premonition. The feeling is confirmed when Marion Zeiler steps forward with a proposal. She suggests that Harold have a training duel with Carla, insisting that it will definitely benefit both, and the prince can only watch, unbelieving. 40 can formulate a response. Lorenzo Salvator smoothly intervenes and offers to be Harold's opponent, saying this is a chance to see the prince's famous skill up close. Harold, trapped, grits his teeth in irritation, and Christia folds her arms, delighted by the turn of events. He sighed, wearily covered his face with his hand, agreed to the duel, but warned do not expect too much. Christia's face lit up with joy. She warmly thanked and promised to arrange everything the very next day. The procession finally stops before the large double doors. Marion points forward with her hand and says they have reached the place. Her shock was visible from the other end of the hall. St. Christia leaned toward Prince Harold, holding his chin with a triumphant smile, and whispered that she would see him later, leaving him trembling with indignation. Later at the party, Harold accompanied Alexandra, and she reminded him that as his fiancée, she expects his eyes to be only for her. He quickly agreed and assured that he had no intention of looking at any other woman. His promise was immediately put to the test. A movement caught his attention, and he turned, walking arm in arm with Lorenzo Salvator with Saint Christia. What he saw only confirmed his suspicions. It all turned out to be a carefully planned trap. He clenched his jaw and could not take his eyes off. Alexandra noticed his petrified gaze and remarked that his attention seemed entirely on the saint. Then she asked if her howling was different from others. The prince embarrassedly denied. Suddenly it dawned on him. He realized that Alexandra's jealousy was incredibly deep, and it was precisely this that made her hostile toward other heroines in the story he remembered. She suddenly turned to him, and he grabbed both her hands. With a sincere and desperate look, begged her to believe him, to understand the truth. She blushed from his pressure, and stumbling embarrassedly over her words, said that it was not that she did not trust him, it was just that the thought of him paying attention to other women was unbearable to her. She looked away, her face still flushed with a blush. "No, I believe you," she whispered, her voice fading, and quietly added, But she admitted that she was unable to control her anxiety, even despite her trust. Harold acknowledged her feelings and explained that he just wanted her to know the truth. Holding hands, a new understanding passed between them. The king watched from the throne. Observing the tender moment between the son and the princess, King D. Hovels allowed himself a slight, satisfied smile, then raised his glass and took a thoughtful sip. His voice rang through the great hall, addressing all the guests and inviting them to enjoy the night's festivities. In one corner, Saint Christia and Lorenzo Salvator raise a toast. Their smiles hint at a shared purpose. Elsewhere, Princes Carts and Raphael chat casually over their drinks. Amid the crowd, Harold stands beside Alexandra, a complex tension in his eyes. He holds wine, and she looks on with a gentle smile. At farewell, Marion Sailor silently and vigilantly stands guard. At the gathering, Harold de Havels caught his breath when the knight in armor Coverdale Mio suddenly bowed low before him. She apologized for her previous rude behavior, admitting she had misjudged him. Harold looked completely bewildered by this sudden apology. He quickly tells her not to worry. Taking the opportunity, she officially introduced herself as Coward El Mio, a guard assigned to Saint Christia. In response, Harold also introduced himself. A warm, admiring smile blossomed on her face. Inwardly, she acknowledged that the rumors were true. Prince Harold really was an amazing person, nothing like she had imagined. When Harold, stumbling, tries to escape the conversation, Alexandra steps forward with a gentle smile, introduces herself as his fiancée Alexandra Chevalier, and thanks Cowardale for understanding how she sincerely wishes to befriend Cowardale, and the knight seemed to freeze in amazement and whispered if Alexandra was sure. Alexandra smiled brightly and reassuringly, and confirmed that she would be delighted if only Cowardale did not mind. Cowardale's face lit up with joy. She understood that Alexandra was as wonderful a person as Prince Harold. She was overwhelmed with gratitude for having befriended such incredible people. Alexandra smiled, thinking that she was probably worried for nothing, but her pleasant thought was shattered to pieces when Saint Christia suddenly appeared and tightly grabbed Harold's arm. The others were in shock. Alexandra's face fell, her expression became a real shock. Christia, ignoring Harold's protest, turned to Alexandra and said that she also wanted to be her friend, adding that such closeness among friends is perfectly normal. To prevent the situation from escalating, Lorenzo Salvator intervened smoothly. He took Christia's hand, said that his brother Harold already had a partner, and kindly offered to dance with her himself. Harold just stood there, stunned by this turn of events. She was intercepted, and Christia turned her gaze to Harold, a sly smile playing on her lips. She noted that if the invitation had come from Prince Wilfred, she would definitely have refused. Harold froze. A drop of sweat slowly rolled down his face. Lorenzo addressed Harold directly. There was no need to hold back just because she was a saint. She directed his charming smile at Christia and asked if her comment was an insult to him. Christia giggled and replied that if it was, then she was pleased. While Harold languished in silent irritation, Alexandra leaned in and quietly said that it was time for them to leave. He looked at Alexandra, noticed her attention, but insisted that as her fiancée he could not just let it go. Alexandra lowered her eyes and quietly whispered an apology. Suddenly Harold was overcome by a strange feeling. He grabbed his head, trembled, and did not understand what was happening to him or whether he had accidentally gotten drunk. Alexandra looked at him, her face full of anxiety. While Lorenzo and Christia glided across the dance floor, Harold and Alexandra watched from the side. The music faded, and Harold said with slight relief that the difficult dance seemed to finally be over. Alexandra turned to him and remarked that he had never danced before. This simple phrase struck Harold like an epiphany. He had been deceived, and at that moment, a small, faintly glowing object fell from his collar. Before he could react, Monaco appeared with an outstretched handkerchief and calmly said that Lord Harold had dropped it. Harold froze in surprise, and his shock deepened when he noticed Casperig nearby and did not understand why his cat was there. She smiled with a hint, asking if he did not like the situation, and added that she thought he would enjoy it. Casperig purred in her hands, while the blushing and confused Harold wondered to himself why she had gone so far and involved his cat in her plan. Monica, holding Casperig, addresses the embarrassed Alexandra. With a slight smile in her voice asks if that comment was directed at her, then advises to put aside her affairs and reminds that a princess should not dance. Sheik sighed irritably. Alexandra sharply replied that she was just about to invite him to dance when he intervened. Attention turned to Harold. He is clearly worried, stammers and says he has never danced and that it would only humiliate Alexandra, while Monica nearby hides her face, embarrassed by this awkward scene. Noticing his hesitation, Alexandra decisively takes his hand, and with a firm look says she will take the initiative. Harold looks stunned at her sudden confidence. Harold is still embarrassed, but Alexandra shines with a bright, reassuring smile. Seeing her determination, he blushes, extends his hand, and solemnly invites her to dance. On the dance floor, Harold pressed Alexandra firmly to himself. Mentally stunned, he had never before seen such a smile from her in the world of Inza. And below them, they are seen gliding across the large ballroom, with Monica watching from the edge. Moving to the music, he aloud doubted whether he really knew how to dance, and Alexandra smiled and reassured him that he was doing very well. The dance suddenly breaks off. Another couple crashes into them. Lorenzo Salvator, dancing with a red-haired woman, turns and apologizes for his clumsiness, and Harold flinches from the unexpected collision. Mid applause from other guests, he pulled himself together again. Harold turned to Alexandra with a gentle smile and told her not to worry, and they continued the dance. From afar, Monica watches them, covering her mouth with her palm to hide a smile. She thinks how wonderful their dance was, and notices that His Majesty Harold also could not quite hide a smile. Alexandra's heart swelled. Her cheeks flushed with gentle warmth. She clasped her hands together, and quiet joy filled her as she realized that yet another of her wishes had just come true. He looked confused. In response, a blush rose up his neck. Alexandra simply smiled and apologized for possibly causing trouble, and he only stammered and whispered, "Yes." The moment was cut short when Lorenzo Salvator appeared. He approached with a peaceful smile and a bow, addressed Harold directly, sincerely apologized for his early interruption, and insisted that his rudeness was unforgivable, while Harold, noticeably irritated, could only think how persistent he was. But in his soul, Lorenzo was much less repentant. A confident smile played on his lips, silently warning them not to interfere with his pleasant evening. He noticed Saint Christia and her knight Caldril Mio, and said it was time for them to leave. A saint should not be kept waiting. When Caldril thanked him, Christia barely winked. Lorenzo solemnly said goodbye to Harold and Alexandra one last time, and declared that now they would take the lead as FFFF. As Lorenzo walked away, he said he had fulfilled the minimum duties of a guide and now left the rest to someone else. Harold watched him go, his face still frowning with irritation. A little aside, the servants led by the head butler bowed in unison, as if the evening duties were already completed. The steward approached Harold and showered him with thanks for his efforts, announcing that, thanks to the prince, the first day of the event had gone successfully. The praise from all the staff left Harold momentarily speechless, and his cheeks blossomed with a blush. Monica leaned toward Alexandra and whispered with a knowing smile, "What he did is seen only by those destined to notice it." Harold, meanwhile, looked away and still felt as if he had done nothing important. Alexandra turned to him, her face softened, and she quietly asked if he realized how much heart and mind he had given to ensure the delegation from the Holy Kingdom was properly received. He looks at Alexandra with a gentle smile, as if saying it's time to go. She meets his gaze, blushing, quietly and happily agreeing, and in the background all the servants, especially Monica and Marion, bow deeply while the couple prepares to leave. Pressed against the stone wall, Prince Harold sits hunched over, overwhelmed by despair. He sighs, muttering to himself that it's completely impossible, while nearby the cat Casperig quietly watches. His thoughts drift to the source of his anxiety, the duel with Carla today, and he clearly feels against such a first-class, physically strong opponent, he has no chance at all. But he did not expect the match to turn into a real duel, and silently curses Wilford for it. Hugging Casperig in search of comfort, he hears the cat ask if he will be okay, and Harold forces a laugh, trying to convince them both that everything will be fine. He's barely gathering himself together when suddenly someone calls him by name. Alexandra has come. Seeing him on the ground, she warmly greets him with "Good morning," and asks why he is sitting here. and he awkwardly jumps up and hastily returns the greeting. Alexandra insisted that they immediately head to the training ground. Warming up before the match is very important. In the distance, Carla was already doing just that, letting out a powerful shout during the swing of a heavy sword, and Gerald simply agreed. As they walked, the familiar Maid Mary along with Siler noticed the prince, and surprise flashed across her face. Ahead, Lady Carla stood ready with her sword, her gaze fully focused. Harold approached his opponent and they shook hands. He politely responded to her greeting, but Carla smiled with unwavering confidence, mentally knowing that she would win, and a wave of fear washed over Harold. Carla firmly holds his hand. This is how the one known in the Haza game as the embodiment of chivalry and a respected heroine acts. Finally, she lets go, says that the rest will be saved for the match, and then makes a powerful training swing that makes Harold flinch. Harold looks at her and thinks that in this world there are no gaming skills. He can only imagine how much exhausting work it took Carla to gain such strength. Probably she trained until she spat blood, and his keen gaze makes Carla embarrassed, so she quietly says that she is a little shy. Frightened, Harold panics and apologizes repeatedly. He blurts out that he was just thinking how beautiful and pretty she is. The unexpected compliment stuns Carla. She blushes and freezes in silence. Realizing what he said, Harold recoils in shame, and Carla barely audibly says, "Thank you." His compliments hit Carla like a physical blow, and she was completely confused. Steam seemed to be rising from her, and a thought flashed through her mind. I knew it. Her sharp reaction threw Harold into a panic. He hurriedly tried to explain to Marion and Alexandra that it was all a misunderstanding, while Casperig sat watching from the floor, and the unflappable Alexandra calmly asked him to explain what he could have meant thinking that way about Carla. Before he could come up with an answer, he was abruptly pulled away to prepare for the duel, and losing his balance, he fell to the floor. Soon, finally wearing his ceremonial uniform, Harold came to the duel field and was stunned to see a large and influential audience. Among them were Christia and his brother Wilfred, as well as Lorenzo, Cardis, and even Raphael. Wilfred announced that in the presence of the delegation of the sacred kingdom of Balshan, which would judge, both kingdoms had put their pride and prestige on the line in this match. He grimaced when he realized that it was much more political than he had imagined. It was not about the pride of the kingdom, but a setup. Under every gaze of the delegation of the sacred kingdom, clearly, they sought to humiliate him and corner him. He suspected that it was a cunning, albeit foolishly overly complicated plan, devised either by Cardis or Wilfred, or perhaps by both together. From the opposite side of the arena, Carla, now in full armor, loudly declared her intentions. She did not care about the outcome. She only wanted to fight Prince Harold with full force, and Harold quietly agreed, mentally acknowledging that victory did not matter here. He thought of only one thing: to meet her sword with a counter-strike. The two fighters stood opposite each other, ready for battle, and the spectators held their breath and watched from the sidelines. Just as the duel was about to begin, Wilfred's voice cut through the tension. He shouted at Harold and demanded to know where his weapon was. In response, Harold raised a large, sturdy shield and decisively exclaimed, "My weapon is this shield." Harold's choice of weapon instantly provoked mockery among the spectators. Prince Wilfred, accompanied by Cardis' brother and other nobles, laughed loudly and mockingly asked if Harold's great plan was simply to endure Carla's attacks and do nothing in response. While Christina II covered her mouth to hide a smile, she found it too amusing. Unfazed by the mockery, Harold laughed confidently. Carla, his rival, turned to him with a determined smile, as if saying they would ignore the spectators and just fight with all their might. He gladly agreed. The duel was in full swing, and Carla did not hesitate. "I'm coming." She lunged forward and powerfully swung her sword in an arc. The blade struck Harold's shield with a deafening clang, and to her astonishment, the shield held firm, completely stopping her movement and absorbing the full force of the blow. In the courtyard, Prince Harold de Hovels faces Carla, their blades locked in a rapid exchange, and he watches her movements closely, seeing skill in her defense. He privately admires her incredible defensive skill. Even the slightest loss of consciousness would not reveal any gap. Meanwhile, Carla catches her breath and feels a surge of confidence, thinking that after defeating Cedric, no weaker than the heroines, and after repelling Carla's attack, she deserved the right to believe in herself more. The brief pause ends. She rushes forward with a mighty cry, her blade becoming a blurred line of motion. Harold meets the strike, grits his teeth, and demands that she take back what she said earlier. Her attack is repelled. An admiring smile appears on Carla's face. She giggles, thinking that he is definitely stronger than Cedric. However, he himself admits the fragility of his defense. Barely held on, and even a moment of relaxation will mean defeat. Feeling his concentration, Carla challenges him again and rushes into another powerful arcing strike. He groans from the effort, blocking the blow, knowing he cannot afford a single wasted move, and must catch the exact moment to take advantage of a gap in her relentless attack. His successful defense left Carla breathless with admiration, and she exclaims that Prince Harold is the first ever to block her attacks exactly like that. Her fighting spirit flared. Carla sincerely thanks him and admits that at first she did not want to participate in Arabia Han, but now is grateful to have found such a strong opponent to exchange blows with. Recalling that she was once one of the fiercest maniacs of in high combat, she decides to gift him her most powerful move, what she is most proud of, Mike Harla Dominios. She takes a low, powerful stance, and in Gerald a recognition flashes like a strike. He has seen this scene countless times in his past life, the very move with which she defeated so many enemies, and with horror realizes that this is the most powerful secret move of the earth element. He tensed, and at that moment Carla roared, calling Prince Harold, unleashing her final technique to destroy the sky. The technique turned into a storm of strikes, hitting his defense one after another. First, second, third, and finally the last, decisive blow. He gritted a groan and, summoning all his strength, blocked the last powerful strike. At the other end of the training ground, Carla opened her eyes in disbelief. She did not believe in his endurance. Catching his breath, he considered the attack. He knew that even in the Inhaz style, the destruction of the four heavens follows one predictable pattern, and it was precisely the four knowledges that were the only reason he was able to block her. On the opposite side of the arena, Carla dropped to her knees. Her strength was exhausted, and she was stunned. He had completely blocked her technique. The effort took its toll, her body locked up, and went completely numb from the aftereffects of the technique. He felt that behind such a powerful skill hid a serious risk. As he remembered from the game, the side effect paralyses Carla for a few seconds, but he still admitted it was an amazing technique. But even knowing this, the blows were incredibly powerful. His hand trembled as he confessed to the spectators that he could no longer hold the shield. Unfortunately, he had exhausted his strength. Hearing this confession, Lorenzo stood up and declared, Harold could no longer fight. The duel was over, and victory went to Lady Carla del Mino. The representative raised his hand and announced the duel finished, proclaiming Lady Carla del Mino the winner, and this announcement left Carla herself completely bewildered. He explains his decision by saying that Harold was barely defending with the shield. Seeing that the prince was exhausted, he believes it is time to end the duel. From his place on the ground, Harold sneered contemptuously at that power. Nearby, another prince agreed with the official assessment and said it was just a friendly duel, not an attempt to harm Harold. Watching from the side, St. Christie looks utterly bored. She glances at Carla and says to her, "Stop it already." Her remark angered Carla. She shouted at Christie to shut up, passionately insisting that Prince Harold completely blocked her most powerful strike, and how could anyone call such a man weak? Christie smiled defiantly and retorted that if the fight continued, everyone would only see Harold struggling, and since it was a holy night, Carla should not mock the weak. Carla did not give up and stubbornly insisted that Christie should be silent. She claimed that Prince Harold was truly strong and worthy of respect, but her passionate words did not move the saint. The argument reached Harold. He was noticeably embarrassed, and thought to himself that all these selfish assumptions and mockeries directed at him must stop. She sharply turned her gaze to him and shouted that he should know this could be punished. He, still crouching, raised his eyes and dryly called her an idiot. His rude insult made her fall silent mid-word, and a look of pure surprise appeared on her face. He stands up, extends his hand with a warm smile, sincerely thanks her, and adds that he truly enjoyed their duel. His unexpected proposal momentarily leaves Carla speechless. Her eyes widen as she looks at Prince Harold, a mixture of surprise and gratitude on her face, and she quietly indicates that she heard his words. He formally offers to have another duel in the future, one where no one can interfere, and Carla accepts his offer with a bright, sincere smile. It is clear her spirit has lifted. When everything is decided, he turns to Alexandra and Marion, nods it's time to leave. They walk away, leaving Carla and the rest of the crowd behind. From afar, St. Christia watches this scene, her face expressionless as Harold walks away. Later, in a private room, Harold sighs heavily and admits that the day exhausted him, and Alexandra quietly comforts him, whispering that he did his best. Suddenly, their conversation is interrupted by the appearance of Lorenzo Salvator. He insistently asks to speak privately with Prince Harold. The appearance of the cardinal's son surprises both Harold and Alexandra. Before Harold can respond, Alexandra steps forward. Her face hardening, she looks directly at Lorenzo and asks if he was not the one who rudely laughed at Harold's match earlier, calling his request shameless. Lorenzo, embarrassed by the accusation, admits that her anger is justified. Still, he insists, is it really impossible to talk to the prince, while Harold remains silent and thoughtfully considers this tense situation. an invitation from the chief organizer himself. Harold D. Hovels felt nothing good would come of this. He considered the options and realized that refusal could cause real trouble. Alexandra, sensing his hesitation, asked if he would really agree. He turned to her. The decision was made. He did not know what Lorenzo's plan was, but for now he was ready to listen. But in his mind he swore. If there was even a drop of harm for Alexandra in the plan, he would stop it at any cost. He resolutely said he would go. Having made the decision, he lightly waved his hand and said he would be away, briefly going to meet Lorenzo. When he arrived, Lorenzo Salvator was standing by the sunlit window, greeted him with a friendly smile, and thanked him for accepting the invitation. Harold cautiously approached and said he had heard that Lorenzo wanted to talk to him. The other young man just waved his hand, beckoned him over, and led him deeper into the room. He interrupted all polite chatter, saying directly that he had come only to listen, and Lorenzo should not bother with formalities. Deep down he became wary, sure that what was to come promised nothing good. Lorenzo just laughed, admitting that Harold had anticipated him. Wasting no time, Lorenzo immediately began explaining the political situation. He said that the Holy Kingdom was now divided into two warring camps, one supporting the Pope. These were the conservatives, and the other consisted of young priests like himself, the reformists. He continued, clarifying that among this division there was only one neutral centus Christia. Lorenz admitted that he had already invited her to join his faction, but had not yet received a clear answer. He explained that was why he accompanied the saint in her delegation to this kingdom, because he fervently hoped to sway her to his side during their stay. Gerald swallowed his words and briefly summarized. Lorenzo wants his help to win the heart of the saint. Lorenzo himself said he would be glad for such support, but clarified that this was not exactly what he had asked for, and Gerald was left guessing what he really meant. He listened as Lorenzo asked to lead the saint onto the right path. This word struck him like a physical blow, and suddenly panic seized him. Here it was, the kidnapping of the saint from the plot of the original story. The prince then told how it was supposed to happen. In the city of Ingasa, Saint Christia would suddenly disappear one day, the kingdom would close its borders and coasts and launch a large-scale search. But all efforts would be in vain. She would never be found. He explained that Wilfred and the rest of the heroines would do everything possible to find the missing saint. But the treacherous Prince Harold would use all his means to hinder them and actively obstruct the search. Despite Harold's interference, the heroes eventually find Christia imprisoned in the port city. They fight back against Lorenzo, the mastermind of the entire conspiracy, save her alive, and close the case. Returning to the conversation, Lorenzo laid out his proposal. If Harold agrees to cooperate, the Holy Kingdom will definitely provide him with significant support in return. He pressed the advantage, outlining all possible benefits. With the power of the Holy Kingdom, Harold's current position could be easily overturned, and the mother would gradually grant him the trust and favor she had given to the first prince, erasing the shame of his defeat in the duel. His words touched the strings of his soul. Harold smiled to himself. Captivated, Lorenzo had clearly prepared carefully, and even knew that the real Harold desperately longed for maternal love. He allowed a confident smile to spread across his face. "Good," he declared in a steady voice. "Understood, I accept this offer," and immediately decided to agree to Lorenzo's proposal. His inner monologue did not cease until they shook hands and sealed the deal. To avoid a bad outcome, he had to behave as befits his title. After all, he was a clumsy, villainous prince. The memory of that agreement faded as the scene changed. In pajamas, Haru hung over the table and sighed heavily, mumbling to himself that today was the observation day at the Royal Academy. Nearby, Casperig placed a calming paw on his head and asked if everything was all right. Monica, his maid, pulled him out of his thoughts and said it was time to get ready. The young lady had already arrived. This reminder passed through him like an electric shock, and remembering the time, he jumped out of bed and exclaimed that he would go change immediately. At the gates of the Royal Academy, a servant solemnly addressed Prince Harold, informing him of a message from the Emperor. Harold stood next to Monica, who was holding the small black cat Casperig tightly. His face hardened as he asked Monica about Prince Salvator's intentions. She said that after observing the academy, they would be taken to a certain place, and Harold instantly understood everything. It was a blitz attack, a quick, decisive strike, and he imagined Saint Christia, realizing that she was the key to this maneuver, called to take the initiative away from him. He ordered Monica to convey his consent to the Emperor, then turned to the servant. Harold asked if he could be relied upon in this matter. The man bowed and assured the prince that he was at his service, and Monica smiled, ready to carry out the order. When the servants left, he stroked Casperig's head and quietly whispered that it was time for them to prepare as well, and the cat responded with a quiet, "Yes." Inside the academy walls, a group of students gathered, including Harold and Christia. They were told that the Royal Academy accepts many extraordinarily talented foreign students and allows them to communicate freely regardless of origin. The Academy guide suggested starting the tour, but Holy Christia interrupted him and fully turned her attention to Harold. She asked if he was really Prince Harold, said she had a request for him and asked for a moment of attention, and with a sly smile added that after he looked at her with such a passionate gaze, she simply could not accept a refusal. She confidently asks Harold to take her away, and he willingly agrees. They both walk down the quiet corridor, leaving the rest of the group behind. While they walk, Christia asks where he is leading her. Harold slyly smiles and replies that this is a place where they can stay alone. Christia jokingly calls him a wicked man. He opens the door to a small room, yes, a bit cramped, but no one will disturb them there and invites her to talk as long as time allows. She is clearly pleased. A blush warms her cheeks, did not expect Prince Harold to be so passionate and straightforward, and deep down she understands that she must look at him in a new way. His assertiveness is both pleasant and even honorable to her. She is shocked as Lorenzo Salvator steps forward with a confident half-smile on his face. He addresses her directly, says he will take everything upon himself from now on, and thanks Prince Harold for his efforts. Then he returns to Prince Harold and hypocritically apologizes, claiming that the Emperor personally asked him to accompany the Saintas if Harold is no longer needed now. He accepts the explanation without any objections, and makes it clear that the Volscian Sacred Kingdom will not withdraw its promised support. Lorenzo praises Harold's understanding and solemnly introduces himself as Lorenzo II Salvatore. A sharp, penetrating smile spread across his face. When Lorenzo confidently said that with the shrine in their hands everything was simple, Harold abruptly interrupted him, ordered to wait for a moment, and with cold, unwavering certainty added that this chance would never come. At that moment, a huge force strikes Lorenzo in the face and throws him back. The blow was so powerful that the stone wall behind cracked. Through the broken wall steps a woman in full armor, her fist still extended from the strike. She roars at the fallen man, calling him a sinner and demanding that he behave decently. The armored knight fiercely points a sword at Lorenzo Salvator, calls him a sinner, and demands that he be silent. Lorenzo looks stunned. Below, Harold de Hovel smiles smugly and tells the knight that Lorenzo is a villain, and this whole conflict is a setup he prepared for her to take advantage of. He continued, confessing that he decided to stop her as soon as he found out she was investigating Sanus's kidnapping. A memory flashed through his mind. If it had gone according to plan, the accusations would have fallen on him, his engagement to Alexandra would have ended, and it would have been a disaster for him. Opposite him, Lorenzo sits on the ground, depressed, and confesses that he was caught. Harold says he does this to protect what is dear to him, and Lorenzo adds in surprise that he never thought Harold could so skillfully pretend to be a clumsy, evil prince. He touches the bruise on his cheek, recalls that only this morning he told Harold about the existence of this class, and wonders how he could so quickly grasp the location of the hidden passages. Harold just stands and listens. His thoughts turn into rage. Lorenzo accusatorily points a finger at Harold, demanding to know everything he knows. Harold's face hardens, and he meets the gaze with brave harshness. But instantly his anger dissipates. Lorenzo calmly smiles and waves his hand as if brushing off the whole matter, admits that the attempt failed, and says he will just wait for the next chance. He rushed forward like a whirlwind, but Christia remained completely calm. She coldly asks if he really thinks he can escape, explaining that Gal has already prepared the place, and nearby Monica adds that she is using the holy boundary stone to seal the room. Lorenzo looks back and sees that Harold with all his retinue has already gathered. Harold explains that Lorenzo's attempt to escape by changing his body was anticipated, and Monica was assigned to prevent it, praises her for excellent work, and presents Lorenzo with two options: be taken prisoner or be defeated on the spot. Enraged, Lorenzo demands to know when Harold began conspiring with the Holy, and Harold reveals that Christia prepared a way for him to immediately retaliate once the order's part is completed, calls Lorenzo's promises empty, and briefly adds that this is not a negotiation. Lorenzo cast an angry glance and realized he had no choice but to leave. Finally, the truth was revealed. Lorenzo is the real culprit behind the kidnapping of Sanus, a vampire with dark power. He is the very antagonist who terrorized the first hero, skillfully using dark abilities, and was only just forced to reveal himself. Opposite the trapped vampire, Holy Christia stood with calm confidence. As the sole mistress of the magic of the holy attribute in this world, her very presence was a natural counter, a divine enemy of the creature of darkness. Reinforced by her power, Harold pointed accusatorily and declared that now, with Lorenzo's true face exposed and his abilities neutralized by the holy, There is no hope for Victor Ribeter to surrender quietly, and in the shadow of his own hair on his face, a treacherous smile blossomed on Lorenzo. He burst out laughing, theatrically covered his face with his hand, mockingly asked Harold if something was wrong, not believing that his grand plans could be ruined by the so-called clumsy Prince Brat, but eventually admitted Harold was right. He would not succeed in escaping. Harold froze, confused by the vampire's indifference. He could not understand how Lorenzo could be so calm, so completely relaxed in this situation. Lorenzo simply smiled and explained that the incapable, spoiled prince left him no choice. He would have to use it. With a sharp movement, the dark spherical object in his hand was crushed. The delicate magical circle that sealed the room instantly scattered, its light went out. He spread his arms wide, his laughter echoed in the now opened chamber. He gave a new order. If they want to live, they must repent for their previous behavior and immediately hand over Saint Christia. The saint herself watched, holding the broken shards of the boundary stone, her calm finally broken. From the high window, Harold de Hovels and Casperig flinched at the sudden flash of light. Harold wondered what had just happened, and his gaze was drawn to the sky, where from crackling energy appeared a huge monstrous bird. The monster loomed over the building, a huge strange bird. Harold recognized it with horror. Westfalner, massive claws extended as it descended. Panic gripped the courtyard. Students scattered, shouting that a demonic monster had appeared, and Harold watched this chaos, his face growing sterner. He clenched his teeth in despair. He had hoped to settle everything quietly before the arrival of the Sacred Kingdom's troops. But now, with everyone watching, it was no longer possible. Elsewhere, he was confronted by coward Elmio, Christia, and Marion Seiler. 3 women stood ready, noticing him with grim determination. Before he could do anything, magical chains burst from the ground and tightly bound him. Christia laughed and said he would not escape. Nearby, Harold and Marion stood in shock, watching this sudden turn. He breaks free from the chains, grits his teeth, and mumbling in despair, utters his name, Lorenzo. Seeing the excitement, Harold instantly turned to Christia, and in a desperate tone demanded that she tell him how to stop the raging demonic beast. But Lorenzo answers, a confident smile spreading across his face. He declares that it is impossible and admits. He destroyed that precious egg guarded by Westfalner, so the beast's revenge will not cease until its rampage is over. While he boasts, the cold steel of the massive sword presses against his throat. Alexandra Chevalier stands over him with a grim smile on her face, calling him a fool, and saying that challenging such a bird will change nothing in the end. When the immediate crisis subsided, Harold sighed and thought about their victory. They managed to break Christia's foretold fate and avoid the disaster that awaited them. This led to an even bigger problem. A monster named Westfalner. Deliberately engaging it in battle made no sense, especially since they knew. The kingdom had already abandoned the academy students to their fate. Despite the grim news, Harold turned to his companion perched on his shoulder, asked Casperig if he could count on him, and the cat answered without hesitation, resolutely ready for whatever lay ahead. With a burst of energy, the little cat landed on the ground and grew to the size of a large panther. From a nearby roof, Harold gave the order to move out, and Casperig confirmed and sprang into action. As they took to the air, he shouted decisively to Alexandra and Monica below, declaring that he would be the bait and take all the attacks of the giant creature upon himself. Hearing his declaration, Monica confidently said to Alexandra, "Leave this to us," and she agreed. With their support, Harold charged straight at the monstrous bird, which let out a piercing cry. It lunged forward, but Harold managed to deflect a powerful blow, and the very fact that he could defend himself showed. The level of Westfalner was probably 100 lower. A thought flashed through him. Maybe they had a chance. He knew that Westfalner had a dangerous ability, homing. The creature could release feathers that relentlessly chased the target until they hit. Still, he decided to confront it, hoping the kingdom would deal with the monster once it arrived. The monster unleashed a volley of its dark, hardened feathers. One of the huge projectiles flew straight at Harold and hit him point blank. But instead of being pierced, he grabbed the huge feather with a confident smile, taunting the beast, laughing at what it thought, as if it could defeat him with a simple feather. He knew that once the homing feather hit the target, it would lose its homing effect, and with this new weapon in hand, a plan began to form. With a piercing screech, the great bird makes vulnerable lunges, but Harold de Hovels does not retreat and deflects the attack with his massive weapon. He maneuvers carefully, thinking that if he can lure the beast a little closer, it will be exactly where he needs it. Elsewhere, noticing that the monster had fixed its gaze on Harold, Lorenzo Salvator instantly seized the chance. He shouted to Marion and the rest of the companions that the monster was distracted, and led them in a desperate run down the corridor. As they flee, Marion Silo looks back, and with a barely noticeable surprise, says that Lorenzo is quite observant. While he just looks ahead, tension and urgency are readable on his face. Again, in the thick of battle, a confident smile appears on Harold's face. He knows he is no longer the worthless and wicked prince. Special training, the devoted support of his fiancée Alexandra and Monica, and the arrival of Casperig as a partner have tempered him and made him stronger. He rejects the role imposed on him. He is not just a stepping stone or a secondary character in someone's shadow. With new determination, he rushes forward. His gaze snaps to the high balcony where Alexandra stands and watches, and with passionate resolve he declares, as long as she looks at him, he will be the main hero. He meets another Vesvolner attack head-on. The blow rings through the air, and he mocks the beast, asking if that is all it has, and warns not to underestimate him. Suddenly the beast disappears from his sight. Harold raises his head, shuddering, looks up and wonders if he is flying. From the balcony, Alexander and Monica call his name and shout in alarm, their eyes fixed on the sky. His attention is instantly drawn to them. He realizes they are now the target. He roars, "Retreat!" his voice full of urgency. He knows what he must do. With a determined expression on his face, he leaps into the air, weapon at the ready, to intercept the threat. Flying through the air, he suddenly realizes the great bird is preparing to use a certain ability to knock him down. Bracing for the inevitable, he knew the attack was about to happen. From below, from beneath the ground, Alexandra shouted his name, and a blinding flash exploded in the sky. He was caught in the blast. A mighty force pressed on him. He recognized it immediately. It was Solvasort, the most powerful technique of Vesvolner. Still, despite the overwhelming pressure, his determination did not waver. He knew this was not the end yet. With a defiant roar, he fought against the relentless flow of energy. He instantly understood the nature of the attack. Solvasort is a barrage of strikes that cannot be blocked by Enver's defensive skill, but it had a critical weakness: it could only hit one person. This was the best strategy. By becoming the sole target, he guaranteed the safety of everyone else, deliberately went into battle unarmed, and relied on the engage hazard technique, which only he could master, the only path to victory. Suddenly, the confrontation reached its peak. The giant bird crashed into the ground and froze. Harold, victorious, sat on its back. While below, Alexandra and Monica watched with awe and relief. Alexandra quietly whispered his name with reverence. From his height, Prince Harold called to his companions Alexandra and Monica. Alexandra, suspended in a jump, admired the brilliant battle he had organized, and Monica, no less passionate, exclaimed that they would beautifully cleanse the great bird. In response, the two women launched a coordinated attack. The blades of their swords gleamed as they lunged at the huge target amid wild battle cries. Watching them, Harold leaned back with a satisfied smile. The huge Vesvolner bird now calmly settled nearby, and he mentally realized the incredible power he now possessed. His thoughts drift to the memory of that holy night when coward El Mio unleashed a powerful technique, the strike of the destruction of the 4 heavenly kings, and he recalls his assessment of it again, the sword of God's grace. The demonstration ended, and Saint Christa approached, took Harold's hands, looked at him with admiration, and said that his performance was simply stunning. She continued, although she had heard from Carla about this situation, she did not expect such power. With a penetrating smile, she added that she was not mistaken in her assessment of him, and any excuses were pointless. Later, Lorenzo Salvator openly tells his companions that he has 2 goals during the visit. Christa explains in more detail. The first is to watch Lorenzo as a political pawn of the church, and the second, long-term, is to find out which prince the Holy Kingdom should ally with in the Kingdom of Dekhavel. Raphael adds that they are seeking an alliance not with the monarch, but with the forces surrounding the throne. Lorenzo names 2 candidates, Prince Harold and Prince Wilfred. He admits that Wilfred is rapidly rising in the eyes of the people, but decisively states that he already considers him unworthy of the alliance. Christa listens, her face troubled. Above all, she is sure that she cannot trust Harold. Meanwhile, Harold is pondering this very reputation and wonders what he could have done to be considered a treacherous heroine. He smiled slightly. It was this suspicion that drew the attention of the Holy Kingdom to him, and for someone like him, without any support in the kingdom, gaining their favor would be a huge trump card in trying to avoid a sad end. He walks beside Christa, who says that in case of a bad outcome, she has already arranged an escape route for the Holy Kingdom. Then she takes out a contract, a document sealing the alliance between her and his squad, and asks him to take care of her. Her sudden friendliness confuses him, and he wonders why she is so frank, knowing that she is a master of intrigue and cunning. The moment was shattered when a huge dark shadow descended over them. A strange giant bird Vesvolner dived down at a terrible speed. Its claws aimed straight at Christa, and shock froze in Harold's eyes. Without hesitation, he pushes Christa aside. The creature's claws dig into the ground where she stood, shattering the stone and raising fountains of dark energy into the air. He looks, hands still extended from pushing, with a stunned expression on his face as he tries to comprehend the sudden, brutal attack. His thoughts race. Why is the self-guided attack aimed at the tiny body of Alexandra? From afar, Alexandra herself watches this with a cheerful, carefree smile. Standing before the colossal monster, Casperig suddenly appears on his shoulder in a cat form and says that the creature's transformation is broken. With a grim look, Harold recognizes their enemy as the Eliminator. In response, he raises his hand. A complex magical sign materializes in his palm, glowing with dark power. He clenches his fist, the symbol flares. Shadow energy explodes and merges around his hand, transforming into a huge ethereal gauntlet. The great bird recoils. Its body convulses as if struck by some enormous invisible force. With a final burst of strength, it releases a spell. A colossal fist of pure shadow emerges and crashes down on Vesfalner, the blow echoing through the yard with a disgusting crunch.